Chapter 850. Of course, this was a subtle effect. Ordinary people would not be able to detect it at all. Coupled with that righteous expression, even if someone noticed that something was wrong, they would not have much of a reaction. After all, everyone had actually gained tangible benefits. After all, in the face of huge benefits, most people's IQ would plummet. It was not that they were stupid, but that their overly excited brains had subconsciously filtered out the suspicious information. Only President Boris noticed the fluctuation of magical energy. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly, revealing a meaningful smile. If it were not for the presence of so many outsiders, he would have been unable to help but applaud this appropriate spell of silent casting. Among all the supreme magical skills, the most important purpose of silent casting was to let the target bear the effects of the spell unknowingly. Andre had undoubtedly achieved this. Just like this, amidst the exclamations, Andre slowly placed the manuscript in the hands of the knight and made a gesture for him to read it. After that, he winked at President Boris and directly cast a teleportation spell to disappear on the spot, giving no time for anyone to react. Looking at the manuscript in his palm, Wilson was stunned on the spot, completely at a loss of what to do. According to the code of conduct of a knight, he should never pry in such a precious thing. However, in his heart, he was extremely eager to see the knowledge recorded in it. For a moment, he fell into an extreme dilemma. One had to know that Johannes had an unparalleled position in the hearts of close combat professionals. He was even worshipped like a god in some areas. The weapons he used and the armor he wore would all become the target of countless people's pursuit and collection, not to mention a manuscript that recorded the swordsmanship and martial arts techniques he had created when he was alive. For a moment, the atmosphere in the hall suddenly became tense. The nobles and smugglers who were still talking and laughing a few minutes ago had now begun to be wary of each other. Perhaps with a single trigger, it would immediately trigger a chaotic battle. Seeing that the situation was in danger of spiraling out of control, old George hurriedly stood up and coughed hard. He shouted, "Everyone, calm down. Calm down, all of you. What we need to do now is to confirm the contents of this manuscript." "Yes, let's confirm what is written in it first." "I agree." Seconded. As the leader of the conservative nobles, old George's suggestion was quickly approved by most of the nobles. Soon, under his guidance, 6 prestigious people were elected to read this precious manuscript together. Among them, 3 were nobles, 1 was a smuggler, 1 was a knight, and the last one was given to Countess Anastasia. It had to be said that old George was indeed very good at mediating conflicts. Looking at the backgrounds of the 6 people, some of them were people that Andre trusted, some of them were representatives of smugglers, and he even considered the professional knowledge of knights needed to decipher the manuscripts. Most importantly, he once again tied himself firmly to the conservative nobles. Under the gaze of countless pairs of eyes, old George said to Wilson, who was still in a dilemma, "Don't hesitate anymore. Open it." Andre is a man of his word. He said that he would give the manuscript to the Alliance. So this manuscript belongs to the Alliance. But this is the manuscript of Master Swordsman Johannes. I. Perhaps because he was too agitated, Knight Wilson began to stammer. It was not that he did not want to see the manuscript, but he could not get over the hurdle in his heart. After all, the birth of the knight class could be traced back to the period when human civilization had just transformed from city-states to feudal kingdoms. In order to better control the army, the lords took the liberty to add some things about etiquette and virtues on the basis of training warriors. As a result, when a warrior advanced to become a knight, he had to choose one of the virtues, such as bravery, compassion, humility, honor, honesty, sacrifice, justice, and so on, as his lifelong conviction. This also meant that every knight had an insurmountable bottom line in their hearts, and Wilson just so happened to choose honesty. Therefore, as long as it was something he did not agree with, he would never pretend to cater to it. Old George would never have dreamed that the knight who had served him loyally for more than 10 years would actually go against him at this crucial moment. His expression suddenly became extremely ugly, and one of his hands that was hidden in his sleeve clenched into a fist. If it were not for his dignity, he might have lost his temper immediately. President Boris, who had been watching coldly from the sidelines, had a hint of playfulness in his eyes. He squeezed out from the crowd and patted Wilson's shoulder lightly. "Relax, Knight. Andre is a mage. It's useless for him to have these close combat skills. Just open it with peace of mind." As these words came out of his mouth, Wilson immediately shuddered, as if he had woken up from his dilemma. He nodded subconsciously. "Since even you said so, then I'll respectfully obey. Everyone, please take a look." As he spoke, he casually flipped open the first page of the manuscript. The densely packed letters on the top were instantly displayed in front of everyone. While everyone was attracted by the manuscript, President Boris revealed a scornful smile. Soon, he also cast a teleportation spell and disappeared on the spot. As a great mage, how could he not see that Wilson was affected by the friendly spell? Subconsciously, he regarded Andre as his closest friend. Subconsciously, he wanted to protect his friend's interests. Coupled with his special belief of honesty, that was why he fell into a dilemma and could not extricate himself. A mere level 1 magic almost caused a powerful knight to fall out with the person he was loyal to. What was more frightening was that the person involved did not even know about it. The horror of a mage was incisively and vividly displayed at this moment. There was a famous saying among the spellcasters that had been passed down for a long time. There were no useless spells in the world, only lousy mages. A white light flashed, and Boris directly appeared in the central control room of the underground mage tower. He had already obtained part of the authority and could freely enter and exit most of the places in the tower. Andre calmly prepared the potion in his hand and greeted without turning his head. "Master, why have you come back? Could it be that the fine wine and dishes at the banquet are not to your taste?" "No, I'm here to tell you that the silent spell just now was quite wonderful. Perhaps you still don't know, but the knight who was practicing swordsmanship with you was very seriously affected. He almost fell out with old George," President Boris said as he came to the front of the experiment table. He silently looked at the strange purple gas in the flask. This gas was like a naughty child, constantly circling around in the flask. Sometimes it was rich, sometimes it was thin. It looked exceptionally beautiful. Chapter 851. Andre did not mind that the other party was checking his potion-making process. He chuckled and teased. Did they turn hostile in the end? If they did, I'll immediately recruit Knight Wilson. You should know that there are too few powerful and loyal subordinates these days. Especially now that I'm in need of people, I wouldn't even refuse a bandit, let alone a knight. Sorry for messing up your business. I've already used magic to dispel the influence on him. President Boris pretended to be innocent and spread out his hands. Tell me, why did you give Johannes' manuscript to that group of idiots? What's your purpose? In fact, when he patted the knight's shoulder, he had coincidentally activated the dispelling ability of a magic item on him. Otherwise, Wilson would have needed at least 1 or 2 hours to wake up. Purpose? Why would you think so? Can't I be generous for once? Andre asked as he lit the alcohol furnace and began to heat up the purple gas in the flask. Although the tone of this sentence was very calm, as if everything had nothing to do with him, as long as one was not blind, one could see the slight smile on the corner of his mouth. Boris could be said to be quite familiar with the character of the young mage in front of him. He immediately sneered, "Ha ha ha, generous? You may be smart, cunning, insightful, and knowledgeable, but the only thing that's not generous is you. You're utilitarian through and through, so you'll only do what's best for you. I really don't see how giving a book with exquisite swordsmanship and martial arts to a group of greedy nobles and smugglers will benefit you, unless there's something else hidden in it. Am I wrong? If I said that this book was snatched from an organization called Blackblade, would you still think so?" Andre obviously enjoyed the atmosphere of this conversation between the mages. He did not hide the origin of the manuscript. He believed that with the power of the Linton City Mage Association, it was naturally impossible for them to know nothing about this organization that secretly networked many high-level close combat professionals. "Blackblade? You provoked them?" As expected, guild leader Boris knew of Black Blade's existence. Judging from his astonished expression, it was clear that he knew a lot about it. Andre nodded calmly. That's right. Not only did I offend them, but I also got rid of Sam, the weapon master. That's why the manuscript is a bit of a hot potato. Besides, I'm a sorcerer. Even if I have profound martial arts and swordsmanship, what's the use? I might as well throw it to someone else as a distraction. Even if Black Sword discovers it, he won't look for me immediately. It was common knowledge that most mages were rather selfish. Apart from their dedication to magic research, the rest was probably apathy toward the world and human society. Hence, when President Boris learned that Andre had caused a huge problem for the nobles, not only did he not show any dissatisfaction, he even laughed heartily and clapped his hands. Pa 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 pa. Wonderful. How wonderful. Who would have thought that not only did you get rid of a huge problem, but you also made those idiotic nobles grateful to you? I'm sure they're still celebrating their amazing wealth, but they don't know that this wealth is actually the source of the disaster. You flatter me. I'm only exploiting the greed in human nature. After all, there's nothing free in this world. If you want to gain something, you have to be prepared to pay the same price. That's why free is a trap in itself. Old George couldn't control his greed, so he can't blame anyone else. Andre never felt that there was anything wrong with his way of doing things, because he had never forced anyone. Instead, he had given them the right to choose. It was just that until now, no one had been able to see through the danger hidden behind the huge benefits. Greed, one of the original sins of mankind. Boris stroked the short beard on his chin and sighed, ending the topic of the manuscript. After all, he was a great sorcerer. He had no interest in things like swordsmanship or martial arts. It should be known that sorcerers who specialized in transfiguration could strengthen their own physical abilities through arcane spells. Even if a warrior trained their body to the extreme, they would still be unable to change the fact that they were made of flesh and blood. On the other hand, transfiguration sorcerers could transform themselves into trolls that couldn't be killed by swords and sabers, giants with infinite strength, mind flayers with psychic abilities, and even indestructible metal golems. In the face of the huge difference in the essence of life, any martial arts or swordsmanship was just a joke. Almost anyone with a little knowledge would understand that only magic was the only path to the supreme throne of truth. While the chairman was sighing with emotion, Andre quickly added a bit of bat wings, octopus tentacles, and 2 drops of mucus that emitted a pungent smell into the flask. After these things fell into the flask, they rapidly reacted with the purple gas. Then, there was a burst of ear-piercing screams from the inside, like a sound that could only be made by a human being under extreme pain. Boris was very surprised by the phenomenon in front of him. He asked tentatively, "What is this?" Andre carefully poured the steam that could make sounds into a pre-prepared flask. He then quickly closed the flask with a wooden stopper and completely sealed the flask with wax. After doing all this, the nervous expression on his face relaxed a little. He replied with a smile, "It's nothing. I invented a little toy based on an ancient potion. Although it won't cause any harm to the body, it can cause some dysfunction in the brain." Brain? Boris subconsciously moved closer to the flask, wanting to smell the residual gas inside to feel what kind of effect it would have on the body. Seeing this, Andre quickly stopped him and explained with a bitter smile, "Master, if I were you, I would definitely not smell it. It can cause the fibrous tissue that connects the left and right sides of the brain, the corpus callosum, to malfunction." Boris obviously had never heard of the corpus callosum. He immediately asked, "Can you explain it to me in detail?" Of course. As everyone knows, the human brain is divided into 2 halves, and these 2 halves of the brain have overlapping functions. They even have the ability to deal with problems independently. It is all dependent on the corpus callosum for management. Otherwise, there will be a situation where the 2 halves of the brain give orders to the same part of the body at the same time. For example, if you want to pick up 2 pins on the table at the same time, under normal conditions, the brain will give orders to both hands. But if the corpus callosum is removed or malfunctioning, then the left and right sides of the brain may give orders to one of the hands at the same time. At this time, the hands will act uncontrollably. Andre smiled and explained in detail the function of the corpus callosum in the brain. At the same time, he gently shook the test tube in his hand, and a chilling light flashed in his eyes. Chapter 852. Corpus callosum? That sounds interesting. Although Boris was not a mage specializing in necromancy, he was still very interested, especially since it involved the most mysterious organ of the human body, the brain. After hesitating for a few seconds, he immediately requested, "Experiment. I need to conduct a live experiment to verify your theory." "No problem. There are still many goblins and orcs in the corral at the bottom of the mage tower. If you're interested, you can cut open their skulls and remove the corpus callosum to see what kind of strange reaction it will produce." Andre picked up the quill on the table and quickly wrote down the order to provide unlimited live experiments on the parchment before handing it over to the other party. He did not care at all about how many of those barbaric monsters would die because of this, nor did he care about how much pain they would have to go through before they died. The reason was simple. As a soul from a highly developed civilization, Andre hated those idiots who did not produce and only knew how to plunder and destroy. Just like the ancient grassland tribes on Earth, it was their honor to be able to sacrifice their lives for the mage's research. It had to be said that this kind of thinking was slightly racist and could even be said to be quite extreme and cruel. If it was on Earth, he would have been scolded by the saints, who would then repeatedly emphasize that all species had the right to fight for survival. However, in Oraire, where humans were not the only intelligent species, more than 90% of the human rulers would agree with this point of view. Even the sacred warriors who symbolized kindness and order would not meddle in other people's business, unless the subject of the live experiment could prove that he or she was a member of the neutral or kind camp. Orcs, goblins, kobolds, gnolls, trolls, and other races that were robbing, and some even ate humans as food, how many of them could be considered kind and neutral? Andre was not too sure about this question. After all, there were always exceptions. However, at least until now, he had not seen one with his own eyes, which showed how low the probability was. It was almost negligible. At this moment, President Boris was fully focused on the corpus callosum. He did not even notice the cold look in Andre's eyes when he mentioned the orcs and goblins. But just as he was about to turn around and leave with the note, he suddenly stopped, turned around, and asked curiously, "I almost forgot. You haven't told me who the purple gas is for. I really want to know who is so unlucky as to provoke a little monster like you." "Ha ha, Master, you're so humorous." This was the first time Andre had heard the president tease him, and he laughed happily. "It's not a big deal to tell you. It's just two guys who have been secretly looking for trouble. But for some reason, I can't kill them immediately, so I can only collect some interest first. Oh, it seems that I have to observe a moment of silence for these two fellows. I believe that they will soon pay the price for their foolish actions." After saying that, Boris disappeared into the dim corridor without looking back. Obviously, he was just casually asking and was not trying to pry into anyone's privacy. After sending the president off, Andre raised his head and looked at the hourglass hanging on the wall. He narrowed his eyes and muttered to himself, "Time really flies. It's almost dawn. I have to hurry, or I might not be able to find the time to deal with the remnants of the underground guild." As a smart person, he always had a very clear order of priority for his enemies. Those that needed to be dealt with first, and those that were suspicious could be delayed. In the Sardinia archipelago, the pirates were undoubtedly first. They were like the roots of a large tree, firmly entrenched in this land, and providing an endless supply of nutrients for the trunk, branches, and leaves. Ranked second with the underground guilds. This was an organization that used the power of the gangs to rule Valen City. They controlled the commercial lifeline of the entire archipelago and were like tree trunks. If they were not eliminated as soon as possible, it was very likely that they would go underground, and it would be difficult to find them one by one. However, Andre did not intend to act rashly before the allied noble army finished reorganizing. The best way to deal with this kind of gangster-like organization was to either hide and not act, or completely eliminate them once and for all. Of course, before that, he still had to let the two fellows who had been causing trouble for him have a taste of losing control of their brains. In order to not attract anyone's attention, Andre did not choose to cast a teleportation spell this time. Instead, he personally entered the smelly sewers and sneaked in the direction marked on the map. It took him over an hour to discover a strong resonance of mana at the end of the maze-like sewers. He didn't know what the other party was using as fuel, but it was able to continuously gather the magical elements in the air. Even from tens of meters away, he could clearly feel the terrifying tremors. As a 10th rank mage, Andre dared to bet on his brain that if there was a problem with the guidance at the center, the impact of the rampaging energy would be comparable to a small nuclear bomb. Not to mention the people in the surroundings, even the entire Valen City would be blown to smithereens. Just as he was about to drink an invisibility potion and get closer to take a look, a man in a black cloak suddenly walked out of the darkness. Without saying a word, he directly put a finger to his lips and made a shushing gesture. He then pulled Andre in the opposite direction. Perhaps because he didn't sense any malicious intent, Andre chose not to resist and allowed the other party to pull him for over 100 meters. Before he could open his mouth to ask, the man took the initiative to remove his hood, revealing an incomparably handsome face and 2 pointy ears. "It's you, Orlando Watts." Andre's eyes widened as he called out the other party's name in a tone of disbelief. That's right, it's me. Why, do you think it's strange?" The half-elf great mage asked with a smile. He always gave people the illusion of being cultured and refined, as if the one standing in front of him wasn't a half-step legendary mage, but an elegant noble. Andre obviously didn't expect this unexpected meeting. He hesitated for a moment before quickly probing. "Why are you here?" Orlando shrugged with a smile. "Of course I'm here to complete the mission set by my mentor. I'm here to help those two idiots summon the true body of the Count of Hell, Nim Yukubo, to the material world. Otherwise, do you think they can do this? I'm curious. What are you planning to do here?" Chapter 853. Me? Of course I'm here to seek revenge on those two fellows. You must know that they have secretly caused me a lot of trouble, so they have to pay a price no matter what. Andre did not hide his intentions in the slightest and spoke openly. He had never been the kind of righteous man who liked to hang forgiveness on the edge. There was only one possibility for an enemy to be forgiven by him, and that was a dead person. The half-elf great mage obviously appreciated this attitude of seeking revenge and nodded approvingly. "Well said. As far as personal feelings are concerned, I support your actions. However, the teacher has specially instructed that before the completion of the summoning, no one should act rashly and alert the enemy. Otherwise, with Count Namuku's degree of caution, he is likely to refuse to respond to the summoning. You are also a mage, so you should know how vigilant the devils are. It can be said that they spend every minute and every second in scheming against each other. Their sensitivity to danger is far beyond the imagination of ordinary people, so I must stop you." "Not even a little revenge?" Andre asked with a frown. He was a little unwilling to just let it go. After all, when the summoning was over, it was not certain whether this fellow could even survive. At that time, not to mention revenge, he might not even be able to find a corpse to vent his anger on. It should be known that summoning the projection of a great devil in the material world and its actual body were two completely different concepts. The former only needed to tear a small opening in the crack of the material world, while the latter needed to use a powerful force to connect the material world and hell together. In terms of the energy level and scale, this could already be regarded as a legendary spell. Even the impact of the moment of connection was enough to cause devastating damage. Orlando undoubtedly understood this point. After hesitating for a few seconds, he quickly replied, "It's not completely impossible. It depends on how small your revenge is. If necessary, I can give you some help." Andre did not say anything further. He directly took out the prepared potion and placed it in the other party's hand. This is my revenge. You only need to spray into the air and let those two annoying flies take a breath. Its effect is... The half-elf great mage glanced at the sealed, strange gas and subconsciously raised his eyebrows. As a spellcaster who was half a step into the legendary realm, he had never seen such a strange thing. Before he figured out its purpose, he would not use it easily. It causes the brain to lose the ability to regulate the body. The person who inhales it will have cross-tactile localization problems, such as loss of control of the hands and feet, loss of vision, and so on. The effect lasts for about 2 hours. Other than that, there are no other abnormalities. The corners of Andre's mouth curled up slightly, revealing a playful smile. In fact, the malfunction of the corpus callosum did not stop there. It even caused the left and right brain to form two completely split personalities. Each half of the brain could learn, remember, express feelings, and carry out planned actions. Think about it. What would happen when a person's body was dominated by two different consciousnesses? Even if he didn't have schizophrenia to begin with, he would still end up with schizophrenia. Wow, a new formula. Orlando let out an exaggerated cry and carefully shook the gas in the bottle, as if considering the impact of this thing on the whole plan. After more than a minute, he reluctantly nodded. All right, I'll help you this time, but as a condition, you have to tell me the formula and the principle behind it later. No problem. Andre agreed without even thinking about it. After getting the promise, Orlando quickly began to chant a spell in a low voice. In the blink of an eye, his whole body slowly became transparent and finally disappeared completely into the air. What he used was obviously not an ordinary invisibility spell, but a real high-level invisibility spell. Even if he was detected by a spell, the other party would not be able to determine his specific position. Andre did not try to follow, because he believed that there must be a lot of magic traps outside the ritual. Perhaps these traps would not be able to stop a half-elf great mage, but it would still be a little troublesome for him. Fortunately, Orlando did not let Andre wait for too long. In just 5 minutes, he returned to where he was. First, he removed the effect of the high-light invisibility spell, then gently pointed at the air, and a clear image appeared in front of him. He saw Casimir Kiz and his subordinate lying on the ground in a very strange position. Their legs seemed to be spasming, bending, and straightening, and their arms were not listening to them. They tried to stand up a few times, but in the end, one of their arms would be out of control, and they would fall down heavily. As for Giles Chundra, he was slightly better. Perhaps it was because he was an undead creature, but he did not rely too much on his brain. He could barely stand up against the wall and continue to guide the huge amount of magic energy. However, from the constant twitching of his 10 fingers, it could be seen that he was affected to a certain extent. The half-elf great mage pointed at the strange appearance of the 3 people in the image and laughed. "Ha ha, how is it? Do you feel better now? You must know that I was shocked by this naughty purple gas. Not only can it affect living creatures, but it can also affect undead creatures." Andre shrugged indifferently. "I do feel much better. I hope they will remember this lesson and consider the consequences when choosing enemies next time." Of course, if there is a next time, don't worry, I promise there won't be a next time. Do you see the patterns and symbols carved on ground? The instant Namuku steps through the passage, the entire portal will collapse and explode. Everything within 50 meters, be it people or buildings, will be crushed. In this way, he will be trapped in the material world and completely become nourishment for the arcane eye. As he spoke, Orlando looked at Andre's left eye that was covered with an eye patch. As a mage who had received all the inheritance of the ancient magic civilization, he was full of curiosity about the 2 ultimate plans, especially when one of them was so close to him. "I hope so. The energy ring produced by my left eye is getting bigger and bigger. I estimate that in about a week, even the eye patch will not be able to block it." Having said that, Andre took off the eye patch. The ring in his pupil immediately seemed to be stimulated by the outside world and began to spin rapidly, emitting a suffocating and terrifying power. Allen stared at him with slight infatuation for a minute and quickly comforted him. "Relax. There's no need to be so nervous. This matter will come to an end in 3 days at most. With Minter's powerful spellcasting ability, Namuku will not have a chance to resist. Chapter 854. 3 days? How can it be so fast? Shouldn't a magic ritual of this scale take at least 2 weeks to a month? Andre asked in disbelief. He had always felt that it was already extremely fast for the legendary Lich to be able to solve the problem of his left eye in half a month. After all, according to the relationship between the level of energy and the magic ritual, the more energy needed to gather, the higher the level of the magic ritual. The higher the level, the longer the preparation time needed. The only way to shorten this process was to increase the number of guiding mages or to use some kind of treasure to gather energy quickly. It was clear from the image just now that Giles Chandra was the only one in charge of guiding the summoning ritual. With his level of spell casting, it was impossible for him to bring forward a summoning ritual that required a month of preparation time to a mere 3 days. Orlando stroked the neatly trimmed beard on his chin and explained with a smile, "You're right. Normally, it would take at least 2 weeks to a month to open a passage between the material world and other planes. However, Casimir Kiz used some very evil means to speed up the entire process. Haven't you noticed? The connection between this city and the soul world has been cut off. All the dead souls have no way to go where they should go. They can only wander helplessly between the streets and alleys. They are like firewood thrown into the fireplace, continuously providing energy for the entire magic ritual until they wither and die. In other words, the large number of deaths you caused when you seized control of the Sardinia indirectly helped Casimir Kiz speed up the progress of the magic ritual." "What?" Andre's expression changed drastically. He immediately cast his gaze into the depths of the sewers. Soon, he realized that the magic light emitted from the sewers was completely black and red, which symbolized extreme evil. Countless souls were in pain and distorted under the contamination of the power of hell. Just looking at it was enough to make one shudder. Damn it! I was wondering why these fellows have been hiding in the dark and stirring up the situation. So they were using me. That's right. They have been using you, just like how you have been using them. The only difference is that all their plans have been exposed to you, while your plans have not been completely exposed. Most of the time, the difference between a smart person and a fool is just that tiny bit. In order to make it look more realistic, the half-elf mage stretched out his right hand and measured it. There was only a small gap between his 2 fingers. From those deep eyes, it could be seen that he was quite satisfied with Andre's performance during this period. Although there were many mistakes in the middle, overall, he handled it very well. Unfortunately, Andre wasn't happy about such praise at all. His face was still gloomy. The reason was simple. He could not forgive himself for neglecting such an important piece of information. If the other party did not imprison his soul, but instead secretly prepared a magic ritual with great destructive power, then wouldn't all his painstaking plans go down the drain? Although many people liked to comfort themselves by saying that failure was the mother of success, Andre didn't like to deceive himself at all. He knew very well that there were only 2 paths in life. One led to success, and the other led to failure. If a person began to use excuses to cover up his failure, then this person would never be able to embark on the path of success. Orlando sensed the unwavering will of the young man in front of him, and very elegantly performed a mage's salute. Congratulations on walking on the right path. You have to know that mages often experience all kinds of troubles and problems in their lives, such as family, friendship, love, sadness for the passage of time, and so on. Some mages choose to abandon everything and transform themselves into an immortal state, dedicating their long lives to magic, completely unaware of the consequences of doing so. When they finally begin to experience the taste of loneliness, it's all too late. There are also mages who choose to blend in with ordinary people. They experience hardships with their families, go on adventures with their friends, fully releasing the radiance of the fire of life, and in the end are even willing to age and die like an ordinary person. Although these people live a vigorous life and will never feel lonely, they will never be able to pry into the true mystery of magic. Apart from the above, there is also a type of mage who would choose a path between the two. They would also savor the beautiful emotions in life, but they would never let themselves sink too deeply into them. They would also use magic to prolong their lives, but they would always have a few family members and friends by their side. There is no doubt that you and I are this type of mage. Perhaps our personalities are slightly different, but in essence, we are not different. Don't be in a hurry to deny it. I noticed that the halfling called Portia is being protected by you. Isn't that proof that you cherish friendship? Andre stared at the half-elf standing in front of him without saying a word. No one knew what he was thinking at the moment. After being silent for a full 10 minutes, he finally took a deep breath and slowly said, "You say that we are the same type of people? No, it's the opposite. I think that we are completely different, whether it's in thought or in action. You just mentioned Portia's experience, so you must have been observing the tragedy from the side, right? Of course. As a watcher, every move in this city is under my control, and that poor little fellow is naturally no exception." Orlando didn't quite understand what the young man in front of him was trying to say, but he still explained. "In that case, have you ever had the urge to help her?" Andre asked again without rhyme or reason. Orlando pondered for a second and gently shook his head. "I'm sorry, no. As a watcher, I must always remain calm and rational, and try not to interfere as much as possible. You see, there's a difference. If it were me, I would definitely take the initiative to do something within the scope of my ability. The biggest difference between us is that I still have my humanity, while you have abandoned it in your long life. In your eyes, friendship, family, and love have all become a kind of spiritual food and not really come from the heart. When necessary, you can completely abandon all feelings." Andre did not hold back and pointed out the cold heart hidden under the friendly surface of the half-elf. He was actually the same as the legendary Lich, a product of the old era. In his heart, there was probably nothing that he really cared about apart from reviving the magic civilization. To them, magic was everything in life. Chapter 855. Orlando was silent. Perhaps no one had ever dared to speak to him in such a tone before, or perhaps he had never realized the problem with himself. In short, the half-elf archmage suddenly fell into a state of confusion and began to think about everything he had done over the years. Andre had no intention of disturbing him. He just stood there silently, waiting for the other party to think it through. Whether it was in his previous life or in this life, he had never really come into contact with a life form that could live for more than 500 years, or even 1,000 years. He simply did not understand what it was like. In such a long time, even steel would decay, let alone an intelligent life that was easily tempted. To a certain extent, it was already not easy for Orlando to maintain a certain level of emotion. Look at his legendary Lich mentor, who had long since completely obliterated all emotions. His entire being was like a cold machine, with a strong sense of purpose in everything he did. If the revival of magic civilization had to first destroy the material world, he would definitely choose to destroy the world without hesitation. What was human nature? Human nature was the desire for survival that existed because of the dangerous environment in which one's ancestors lived. The desire for victory, the desire for a partner similar to oneself, the concern for one's own kind and one's own status, and the habit and sympathy of prehistoric humans, as well as the impulse to help one's own kind. It could be changed by acquired memories and the things around it, but it would also gradually become less intense in a long life and eventually disappear completely. Andre was not too sure if the half-elf had really lost the last trace of humanity, but he could guarantee that the other party had definitely not experienced the taste of impulse or anger for a long time. He did not know how much time had passed, perhaps a few minutes, perhaps an hour or two. Orlando seemed to have figured something out. He suddenly raised his head and smiled. "You're right. We do have some differences, but that doesn't mean that we're not the same kind of people. The reason is simple. You're still so young and have not experienced much at all. You can't understand the essence of the universe we exist in, and what the existence of mages means. Don't worry. When you live to my age, you'll slowly realize what's most important and what can be given up. After all, no one's life is perfect. If you want to get something, you have to pay the price first. Isn't that right? The price you pay is to abandon all strong emotions and then turn them all into a psychological placebo. Or should he use a charitable attitude to face kinship, friendship, and love? I'm sorry, but this is not the future I want. At least, I don't want it now. The future? Who can say for sure? Andre shrugged his shoulders in a carefree manner. He always had a detailed plan for his future, but it was only limited to a few years or a few decades. He had never thought about what would happen in 100 years. As a semi-elemental creature and flaming duke, it was almost impossible for him to die of natural causes within 1,000 years. However, in his heart, he had always thought of himself as a human. He did not realize what such a long lifespan meant. However, Orlando was clearly aware of this. He wasn't in a hurry to refute. Instead, he emphasized meaningfully, "I've said that we're the same kind of people. Whether you believe it or not, it's an ironclad fact. You might not be able to understand my choice now, but please remember that you are a mage, the master chosen by the Arcane Eye. You are the person who will bring about great changes in the prophecy. You are also a thorn in the side of many gods. As for what will happen in the future, let's wait and see." There is no doubt that there would never be a result if they continued to argue about the same kind of people. That was why the half-elf mage took the initiative to end this topic. He was very clear that people with strong wills like himself and Andre would never be convinced by mere words. Continuing to argue would only waste precious time. Of course, Andre was also pressed for time, so he immediately nodded in agreement. "Then let's wait and see." "Oh, right, this is the potion formula and principle that I promised to give you just now. While you were away, I recorded it on the sheepskin." Orlando took a quick glance at it. A satisfied smile quickly appeared on his handsome face. "A very interesting topic. I think I should be able to research it further. Who knows, I might be able to find some new ways to deal with giant monsters." "Then I wish you success in your research. If there's nothing else, I'll go back. You should know that there are still many troubles waiting for me to deal with." Having said that, Andre placed one hand on his chest and bowed slightly. He then turned and walked towards the nearest exit. Before he could take a few steps, the half-elf mage immediately took out a glass bottle containing a bloody sarcoma from his waist bag. He called out softly, "Wait, I'll give this to you as a return gift. I have no use for it anyway." Hearing this, Andre turned around and glanced at the thing in the bottle. He frowned and asked, "What is this? It looks a little disgusting." "It's an organ cut from a woman called the female scorpion. It's this organ that allows this woman to freely travel between the material world and the shadow world. You only need to transplant it into someone's body, and that person will obtain the same ability." Having said that, Orlando threw the bottle directly into the air and disappeared again. It was unknown whether he had left or entered a state of invisibility. Female scorpion. After Andre caught the bottle, the female assassin with the strange ability quickly appeared in his mind. He slowly sneered, "Humph. I was wondering why I couldn't find her whereabouts after the last time we met. It turns out that she hid in the Sardinia Islands and became the captive and research subject of a great mage. How unlucky." The sarcoma in the bottle was not big. It was about the size of an adult's eyeball. Its surface was densely surrounded by a layer of gray shadow energy that flowed like liquid. In order to ensure that it was always in an active state, the bottle was filled with a solution that had been treated with magic. There was no need to worry about necrosis for the time, being for a month or two. Due to the vigorous development of necromancy magic in Orier, organ transplants did not need to be as troublesome as on Earth. There was blood type testing and matching, and there might even be serious rejection. With the help of a few spells, the body parts could be changed however he wanted. Even if the success rate was not 100%, it was at least 80%. In other words, if Andre immediately transplanted the sarcoma into his body, he would be able to obtain the ability to travel between the material world and the shadow plane. Chapter 856. When Andre emerged from the dirty sewers, the sun had risen, bringing light and warmth to the island. Even though the energy wall separating the entire city had yet to disappear, many residents still cautiously walked out of their homes and looked in the direction of the upper city and the fortress. They weren't fools. Last night, there had been the deafening sound of cannons and the deafening battle cries. There had to have been an intense battle. In particular, the small guilds that Jesperod had gathered in the lower city were especially concerned about the changes in the situation. They had all sent people out to find out what was going on. After all, the allied noble army had set up camp and started to reorganize after taking over the castle. They didn't announce their arrival with great fanfare, nor did they raise any symbolic flags. Only the collapsed city gates and the corpses of the rat men littered the streets of the upper city, told of how frightening the night had been. Perhaps because he had been too excited after his conversation with Orlando, Andre wasn't very tired, despite not sleeping for an entire night. He strolled alone on the empty path, enjoying the warmth of the sun on his body. He didn't seem to be in a hurry to attack the underground guilds in the upper city. He knew that even though the soldiers of the allied noble army were well-trained and could obtain victory even if they immediately launched a fierce assault on the remaining enemies after taking over the castle, the result of doing so would be heavy losses for themselves. The gains didn't make up for the losses. It was important to note that clearing out the enemy forces in the city was only the first step of the final plan. Next, eliminating the pirate King Francis was the most important. Just as Andre was considering how to set up a massive pocket formation based on the limited terrain and sea of Valen Island's harbor, he suddenly discovered a beautiful figure blocking his path forward. She was none other than the charming witch, Maris. This ambitious woman wore a crimson V-neck dress today, revealing a large patch of her snow-white and plump skin. She had a charming smile on her face. There were 6 strong bodyguards behind her. It was obvious that they had been waiting here for a long time. "Is there something you need from me?" Andre stopped in his tracks and asked with great interest. "Of course. I wonder if a busy person like you could spare some time to have breakfast with me. I have a lot of questions that need answers, and at the same time, I have something to tell you." As she spoke, Maurice took 2 steps forward as if there was no one around. She bent her knees and performed a standard salute. The bottomless cleavage on her chest instantly made several men around her gulp. She didn't know if it was because of the increase in power in her hands or because she had been nourished by too many men, but her entire body began to exude the charm of a mature woman. Even if many men could tell at a glance that she was definitely a slut, they still couldn't suppress their primitive urges. But it was a pity that Andre wasn't among them. He raised his head and glanced at the position of the sun. After thinking for a few seconds, he quickly nodded. "No problem. I can spare half an hour. But after half an hour, you and your men must be ready for battle because the final plan is about to enter the countdown." "Huh. As you wish, please follow me." Maurice couldn't wait to grab Andre's arm and quickly walk to her nest. As she walked, she cautiously observed her surroundings. Whenever she encountered a suspicious target, she would immediately let the bodyguards by her side check it out. That nervous and uneasy look made it seem as if she was hiding from being hunted. Although Andre wanted to ask the reason several times, he held back in the end. He planned to wait until they reached a place where there was no one around. After all, no one could guarantee that there wouldn't be any enemy spies on the streets. Especially at this critical moment, safety was the most important. 10 minutes later, the group finally arrived at the entrance of Thousand Sails Inn. This place was supposed to be filled with drunkards, brokers, sailors, and prostitutes. However, due to the turbulent situation, there was not even a single guest at the moment. There was only a group of fierce-looking fellows sitting in the hall. They were either sipping from cups of cheap ale or whispering to each other. Every one of them had a weapon within their reach. Seeing Maurice walk in from the door, they hurriedly stood up and bowed respectfully. Boss, boss, how's it outside? When are we going to join the battle?" "That's right. I'm about to fall sick from being cooped up here all day." In an instant, countless people came up to ask questions or complain. The originally quiet hall instantly became lively. However, Maurice clearly didn't have time to answer them one by one. She slammed the table and yelled, "Shut up! All of you, behave yourselves. I'm going to discuss something with an important guest. All of you be quiet. In at most half an hour, we might start a full-scale war with the Underground Guild. Be prepared." As soon as she finished speaking, a half-beast man about 2 meters tall, with 2 sharp fangs on his face, stood up and roared excitedly. "Haha, the war has begun. The war is finally going to begin. Long live." Following the unique roar from the orc's throat, the muscles all over his body bulged rapidly. He immediately crushed the wooden wine cup in his hand. Infected by the fanatical atmosphere, the rest of the people stood up and cheered. They were like a group of bloodthirsty thugs, looking forward to using their weapons to tear open the throats of their enemies and use their blood to pave the way for the future. Maurice seemed to be a little proud of the manic behavior of her subordinates. She turned her head slightly and asked Andre behind her, "How are my people? Aren't they very valiant?" How do you want me to evaluate them?" Andre shrugged helplessly and asked in return, "Just tell the truth." Maurice acted as if she didn't see his troubled expression and put on an expression that said, "Come and praise me." After all, she had only taken over this territory for about a month, but she had already gathered more than 30 experts. Many of them were professionals, especially that orc warrior just now. He was at least level 4 and above. In terms of ability, he could be described as outstanding. But unfortunately, Andre's next sentence made her tremble in anger. "Although I'm very sorry, my evaluation of your subordinates is that they are a motley crew. They may be able to gain the upper hand in a one-on-one battle or in a small team, but in a real war with more than 100 people, their role is very limited. About 100 or 200 professional soldiers can slaughter them." Chapter 857. Are my people that weak? Maurice obviously couldn't accept such an evaluation, so she asked in a low voice. Andre asked back with a playful smile, "What? You're not convinced?" "Of course. My men are all elites. How can they not be compared to a group of soldiers who don't even have a profession level?" Although Maurice still managed to maintain a smile on her face when she said this, her eyes were full of anger. "Elites? Ha ha. Sorry, I can't help it. Don't tell me you still haven't figured out the difference between an army and a gang?" Andre stared at her with a playful look. He knew he shouldn't laugh, because most people in this world didn't understand the difference between the two. Even in many backward areas, there was no difference between an army and a gang. But when he saw the disorderly mob in front of him, and when Maurice mentioned the word elites, he couldn't help it. If they could be called elite, then the Noble Alliance army would be equivalent to the Spartans, while the Knights of the Cantera Kingdom would be equivalent to the superheroes in movies, and the mages would be equivalent to the high and mighty gods. Andre dared to bet that even if the militia of Lonely Mountain Town was organized, they could easily wipe out this mob of so-called elites. To some extent, this land full of swords and magic was no different from the cold weapons era on Earth. Usually, the colder the area, the better the quality of the soldiers, and the easier it was for a military power to emerge. As for the warm South, there might be a small number of elite troops, but overall, they were far from the terrifying strength of the North, where everyone was a soldier. They could only rely on numbers, equipment, and magic to make up for it. Maurice obviously didn't understand what an army was. She gritted her teeth and retorted, "Of course I know the difference. The army has more people than us. Their equipment is better than ours. Besides that, is there any other difference?" Andre smiled and waved his hand, explaining, No. The biggest difference between an army and a gang is never the number, but the steel-like discipline and the absolute obedience to orders. Don't think that those ordinary soldiers look easy to kill, but when they form a phalanx, they instantly become the most terrifying killing machines. Under the command of the commander, they could ignore the injuries and deaths of their comrades around them. Through squeezing, cutting, encircling, and other tactics, they could slowly wipe out this group of idiots who did not have any military knowledge. At that time, no matter how outstanding their individual abilities were, they would not be able to change the fate of their defeat. Of course, you might not believe what I'm saying, but it doesn't matter. It won't be long before you see for yourself how terrifying a real army is. Then I'll wait and see. Maurice was obviously very angry. She did not want to continue this topic and went straight to the room on the second floor. She knew that with her limited knowledge, it would be impossible for her to win against a knowledgeable mage. Andre shrugged nonchalantly and followed closely behind her. Not long after, the two of them arrived at a room that had been meticulously decorated. On the long table in the middle of the room was a sumptuous spread of food. There were fresh fish, crabs, prawns, and scallops that had just been caught from the sea. There was also golden bread and fried eggs that had just been roasted. In the middle of the room, there was also a whole lamb that had been smeared with a large amount of spices, constantly emitting an enticing aroma. Andre, who had not eaten anything for the entire night, lightly sniffed the aroma in the air and asked in surprise, "This is the breakfast you were talking about?" "That's right. I specially prepared it for you. Are you satisfied?" As Marie spoke, she raised her hand and snapped her fingers. Soon, two chefs came out of the kitchen and waved sharp kitchen knives. They cut the roasted meat from the whole lamb into slices and carefully smeared the secret sauce on it. Satisfied? Extremely satisfied. You have to know that I was busy the entire night and needed to eat something nutritious. Saying this, Andre unceremoniously sat at the main seat and picked up a fork to taste a small piece of lamb. The roasted meat is very tender. The taste of salt and pepper is just right. Maurice was obviously not in the mood to eat. She directly sat on the chair opposite him and said with a serious expression, "Don't just focus on eating. Tell me what happened last night." Andre swallowed the roasted lamb in his mouth and looked at her with a playful gaze. After a full minute, he asked, "With your intelligence and wisdom, do you still need to ask such a question? Even if you didn't guess it, what about the spies under your command? Did they not tell you what happened last night?" "Damn it. Of course I guessed what happened last night. I just wanted to confirm it." Maurice angrily slammed the table and shouted. She wasn't as ladylike as she pretended to be on the surface to begin with. She could even take out a knife and cut someone when she was angry. Add to that the fact that she had been teased time and time again, she finally couldn't help but reveal the fiercest side of her personality. "All right, I can tell you that I cleaned up the rat men in the upper city last night, as well as the pirates in the castle. Now, only the underground guilds are left in Valen City, but they are barely hanging on. I will eliminate this last enemy before noon." Andre had no intention of hiding anything, even going as far as to tell her the follow-up plan. In his opinion, compared to the pirates and rat men that were easy to distinguish and identify, the underground guilds were like stubborn eczema that had grown on the skin and needed to be disintegrated from the inside. If he couldn't obtain a list of the upper echelons, it was basically impossible to eliminate them all in one fell swoop. And the person who could provide the list was sitting right in front of him. Hearing this news, Maurice immediately stood up in excitement and asked with hurried breathing, This means you are about to become the supreme ruler of this archipelago." "Supreme ruler? Why would you think of using this term?" Andre didn't directly answer the question and continued eating his fried egg without raising his head. "Isn't that so? All the guilds in the lower city are now under your control. Once the underground guilds fall, you will be the king of the Sardinia Islands." Maurice's mental state was extremely excited at the moment, her eyes shooting out a terrifying light. After all, if Andre's plan succeeded, then she would undoubtedly become one of the direct beneficiaries. She would be able to obtain great power and status, and would no longer have to live such a life of fear. Chapter 858. Ha ha ha! King of the Sardinia Islands? My dear Maris, have you heard too many bard stories? Andre laughed heartily as he put down his fork and wiped the grease at the corner of his mouth with a napkin. In his eyes, even though the Sardinia Islands weren't small, they only had a population of less than 100,000. This included the slaves who didn't have any personal freedom. It couldn't even compare to a town on Earth that had a slightly higher population density. He wanted to proclaim himself a king with such strength? This was simply hilarious. Let alone the Sardinia Islands, Andre wouldn't do something so shameful even if he had to take over 100,000 people in Lincoln City and the surrounding areas. In his eyes, a king had to rule over at least a fixed population of 1 or 2 million, and this was taking into account that the continent was still vast and sparsely populated. Otherwise, he would have added another 0 to this number. In fact, the Canteru Kingdom in the north, which had a relatively low grain production, had a population of at least 3 million. More than 70% of them were serfs and tenants attached to the nobles, while the remaining 30% were free citizens, nobles, merchants, and professionals. However, the northern county that lonely mountain town belonged to was the most remote, poorest, backward, and sparsely populated county in the kingdom. Even though it occupied nearly a third of the territory, its population was less than 200,000. Even the wild beasts and monsters in the wild were several times that number, not to mention the countless orcs in the frozen wastelands. Most importantly, as a mage, Andre didn't like to expose himself to everyone's gazes. He preferred to control everything from behind the scenes, just like the legendary Lich. Through a huge information network, he made countless forces unknowingly submit to him. Maris clearly noticed the disdainful look that flashed past and immediately asked with a frown, "Don't tell me you don't plan on ruling Valence City." "No, of course not. It's just that I won't be ruling by myself, but by a trade alliance." Dictatorship isn't the choice of smart people. Not only do they have to be constantly vigilant against threats everywhere, they also have to spend a lot of energy dealing with government affairs. The slightest mistake will lead to a tragic death. Even if they obtain the enviable authority, they will also lose their freedom and the right to enjoy life. I'm not that stupid. I'm not going to give up on being a mage with a better future and be bound by some boring things. But don't worry, the promise from back then is still valid. After all, in the trade alliance, I still have absolute authority. It won't be a problem to arrange a position for you. As for how high the position will be, it will depend on how useful you are in eradicating the underground guilds. After all, the greater the effort, the greater the return, isn't that right? In order to let this uneducated woman understand the future path of the Sardinia, Andre patiently gave a detailed explanation. At the same time, he hinted that it would be best if she didn't have any bad ideas. Otherwise, he wouldn't mind getting rid of a few unstable factors after dealing with all the enemies. Maurice was a smart person. It only took her a few minutes to figure out her situation. She immediately nodded without hesitation. Of course, the greater the effort, the greater the reward. I promise that when we take action, I will provide you with a list that will satisfy you. Also, you mentioned an alliance just now. Can you tell me who is included in this alliance? Andre stared at the ambitious woman sitting opposite him with a playful expression. He sneered and teased. "What? Do you want to join too?" "Am I not qualified?" Maurice asked, thinking that she was smart enough to do so. There was no doubt that her ambition was expanding, and she didn't know her own limits. She actually wanted to tear off a piece of meat that didn't belong to her from the mouths of a group of crocodiles. "I'm sorry. Although it's a little hurtful to say this, I still have to tell you clearly that you are far from qualified to be my ally. Remember, control your greed. Don't touch those things that don't belong to you. Otherwise, I can't guarantee that no one will treat you as a target that must be eliminated." Andre didn't hold back at all and directly gave a clear warning. He dared to bet with his head that if this woman dared to extend her hand into the alliance, whether it was the noble alliance led by Old George or those daring smugglers, they would immediately launch a strong counterattack, or even kill her to silence her. In front of huge benefits, not to mention a small gang leader with no background, even if the other party was a powerful merchant or noble, they would still kill her. Maurice's expression changed greatly. She clenched her fists and asked sternly, "Are you threatening me?" Andre sighed slightly and put down the fork in his hand. He stretched out a finger and shook it gently. No, don't be silly. My dear Maurice, I'm just advising you not to do stupid things. You have to know that the other members of the Alliance are not as benevolent as me. Once they feel that you are a threat, your corpse will be hung on the highest building in the city within 3 days at most. Are you not going to do anything if they do this?" Maurice obviously wasn't willing to give up just like that. She began to test Andre's attitude again. Her goal was very clear. That was to become one of the important figures with decision-making power in the future of this archipelago. For this, she was willing to pay any price and take any risk. Ha ha! Care? Why should I care? Don't forget that I am the person with the highest benefits in the Alliance. What they're doing is protecting the interests of the Alliance from being violated. I can't wait to support them. Forget it. Perhaps this is an empty explanation that can't let you understand how terrifying the members of the Alliance are. It doesn't matter. Wait a few more hours and you will understand what I'm saying. War was always the best way to show one's strength, so Andre didn't want to continue talking nonsense. He believed that after seeing the strength of the Noble Alliance and the smugglers, this overly intelligent woman would make a wise choice. Maurice stuck out her tongue and gently licked her seductive red lips. She said softly, I will open my eyes and take a good look at what abilities your allies have. Just like if their strength doesn't make you feel fear, then no matter what you do, I won't stop you. Are you satisfied with this answer? Before she finished speaking, Andre sneered and finished the latter half of the sentence. He now understood that Maurice was the type of person who wouldn't give up until she saw the coffin. Once she saw the difference between the army and the gangs, she would quickly dispel all unrealistic ambitions and fantasies. Chapter 859. After eating a sumptuous breakfast, Maurice couldn't wait to take out a book filled with names and portraits from her underwear. She explained in a low voice, This is all the information I've gathered on the high-ranking members of the Underground Guild. It includes the names, appearances, and family situations of the two highest-ranking leaders. There are also some who have privately expressed their willingness to betray us at a critical moment. The ones in black ink are our enemies. The ones in red ink are our own people who have already sided with us. And the ones in blue ink are those who are still watching or trying to negotiate terms. Also, according to the information I've received, in order to take revenge for the betrayal in the lower city, the leaders of the guild have sent out the ace assassin who is feared by everyone. Ulik. Ulik? Andre muttered softly as he flipped through the content of the book. The man who had led the owl squad to attack him instantly appeared in his mind, and a mocking smile quickly appeared on his face. This guy's mental fortitude is pretty good. He wasn't scared out of his wits, and even dared to carry out an assassination mission. No wonder you were so careful along the way. You were afraid of being assassinated. You know him? Maurice raised her eyebrows in surprise. One had to know that Ulik was the guild's most powerful weapon to intimidate their enemies for so many years. The number of unlucky fellows who had died directly under his brutal attacks was at least 100, if not 200. Every time this name began to circulate on the streets, it would immediately cause waves of panic and chaos. But it was a pity that the deterrence of this famous assassin was very limited in Andre's eyes. He rubbed his chin and nodded with a face full of mockery. I know him, of course I know him. I warmly greeted him and his owl squad a few days ago. I didn't think that the Underground Guild would send him out again so quickly. The guild's assassination squad, the owl squad? You had a direct confrontation with them? Maurice keenly sensed the thick scent of blood in his tone and immediately asked nervously. Rather than a confrontation, it would be more appropriate to call it a massacre or venting. Coincidentally, I was in a bad mood that day, so I roasted them all into charred corpses. Only Ulik was left, and I had him deliver a declaration of war to the guild leaders on my behalf. Andre explained in a calm tone. For a mage of his level, ordinary assassinations would have little effect. Unless it was a high-grade assassin with anti-magic weapons, they wouldn't be able to break through the various defensive spells even if they managed to get close. Maurice was so shocked that she couldn't speak for a long time. After a full 2 to 3 minutes, she muttered to herself, "So that's how it is. I was wondering why Urik didn't make a move after the news spread." It turns out that his owl squad is all dead. Andre didn't pay attention to the crazy woman in front of him. He quickly flipped through the information on the high-ranking members of the guild, quickly selecting those who had value and those who had to be eliminated. In a short while, he had determined the deaths of dozens of people. Just as he was concentrating, a dark shadow silently killed the two strong men guarding the door. He gently opened the door crack and slipped into the room with only two people. Due to the angle, he could only see Maurice. He couldn't see Andre, whose back was facing the door. In order to prevent the scent of blood from spreading, he took out a handful of light yellow powder from his waist pouch and sprinkled it on the door. He then curled into a ball and hid himself in the cupboard next to the door. It had to be said that this person, who was either an assassin or a spy, was very cautious. After discovering that there were two people in the room, he immediately canceled his original plan and patiently waited for one of them to leave. It was obvious that he was a true veteran in this field. He knew the most important rule of the underworld, which was to never expose oneself in the middle of a mission. There wasn't much content in the book. In just 10 minutes, Andre finished reading it all and casually threw it on the table. Too little. This information isn't enough for us to completely eliminate the entire guild in one go, especially when there are a few leaders whose faces and names we don't even know. Damn it. You have to understand that I've already taken a huge risk in order to obtain this information. Time was too tight. I couldn't possibly gain their trust so quickly. Maurice argued, gritting her teeth. I know it's not easy for you, so I don't mean to blame you. I'm just stating a fact. It seems that before we act, we need to capture one of them alive. Who do you think knows the most and has the most value in being captured? Andre asked in a low voice as he tapped the table with his fingers. After careful consideration, he decided not to act rashly. He would only launch an attack after figuring out all the upper echelons of the guild. The reason was simple. After looking at this list, he realized that the influence of the underground guild was much larger than he had imagined. It wasn't limited to the Sardinia itself. There were even branches in many ports along the coast. On one hand, they were responsible for helping the pirates find out the routes of merchant ships. On the other hand, they were responsible for selling valuable goods. If they couldn't destroy the entire system in one go, then the escaped upper echelons could use these branches to make a comeback. As a smart person, Andre didn't want to create a troublesome enemy for himself for no reason. Thus, he would rather take action later to ensure that such a situation wouldn't happen. Hearing that he wasn't blaming her, Maurice immediately heaved a sigh of relief. After thinking for a few seconds, she quickly suggested, as far as I know, there's only one person in the entire guild who has seen the faces of all the leaders. That person is the ace assassin, Ulrich. Furthermore, he's not in the headquarters right now. As long as you can find and capture him, you'll be able to obtain many unknown secrets. Of course, other than that, the two leaders I've found should also know, but it's almost impossible to capture them alive. In the basement of the guild headquarters, there's a room that's completely isolated from the outside world. Once the leaders sense danger, they'll all enter and seal the door. They'll only come out when the danger is over. Oh, so the people outside can't go in, and the people inside can't come out? Andre's eyes lit up as he asked. If the leaders locked themselves in a room similar to a bank vault, then he wouldn't have to worry too much. He could just force his way in. In any case, as long as he blocked the door, it would be useless no matter how capable the other party was. Maurice sneered and shook her head. Dream on. The guild leaders aren't as stupid as you think. Even though I've never seen what it looks like inside, there's one thing I'm sure of. There's a 100% escape route to the outside world. Chapter 860. Damn it, I hate these endless secret tunnels. Andre rubbed his forehead and grumbled in a low voice. To be honest, he really didn't understand if these powerful people in the South all had delusions of being persecuted. Whether it was the nobles and merchants of Lincoln City or the pirates and gang leaders of the Sardinia Islands, they all liked to dig underground like rats. It was as if not having a secret escape tunnel would reflect their identities. What was even more disgusting was that one would never know where these escape tunnels led to. Unless the sea route to the island was sealed, it would be a pipe dream to find the exit. Valen Island was the largest island in the Sardinia Islands, reaching over 24,000 square kilometers. It was twice the size of many super metropolises on Earth. Even if one stood at the top of the tallest castle, they wouldn't be able to see the end of the island. It was impossible to control such a long coastline with the current shipbuilding technology of the continent. It looks like we need someone in the know, someone who has a deep understanding of the entire guild and the leaders. And we need to be quick. After rejecting all other possibilities in his mind, Andre lightly tapped on the table and quickly came to a conclusion. He didn't have much time to waste. He had to get rid of all the unstable factors in Valencity before midnight. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to create a false image of prosperity before the arrival of the pirate King Francis. Maurice spread out her hands helplessly. "I'm sorry. I'm afraid I can't do anything about this. You can only rely on yourself. Of course I know this is beyond your abilities, so I never expected you to be able to provide any help. Now go deliver a few letters for me. I need a true professional at the moment." Andre took out the quill and ink he carried with him as he spoke. He quickly wrote a few lines of words on the parchment, then tore them into strips and folded them. "Who are you sending them to?" Maurice asked expressionlessly as she looked at the strips of paper that had been folded into different shapes. She didn't attempt to look at the contents. If possible, she didn't even want to have anything to do with this matter. As a woman who had a deep understanding of the strength of underground guilds, she was well aware of the consequences of doing such a thing. It would be fine if she successfully eliminated all the leaders and upper echelons, but if she failed, she would immediately become the target of the other party's revenge. She shuddered at the thought of the endless assassinations in the future, and a trace of fear appeared in her eyes. Andre obviously didn't care about the so-called revenge or assassination. He pointed to one of the notes and said, "This is for Jess. Tell him to be prepared. As soon as he receives the signal to start the war, he must destroy the remaining forces of the guild in the lower city area at all costs. Remember, in order to ensure that nothing goes wrong, don't leave anyone alive in this operation." "Can that liar do it?" "I highly doubt that." Maurice curled her lips and sneered disdainfully. "Don't worry. Even if he can't do it, someone else will do it for him. To a certain extent, this should be a test. I want to see how far this liar can go for power, and if he can even abandon his humanity." As he said this, Andre maintained a faint smile, but it couldn't hide the cruelty and coldness in the content. Maurice subconsciously shivered and began to sympathize with Jess silently. At the same time, she reminded herself not to anger this terrifying young man in front of her. This was because she knew that it was not a simple order to not leave anyone alive. It meant that all the direct members of the Underground Guild, regardless of their gender or age, would be wiped out. Even babies who were just a few months old were no exception. The bloodshed and coldness behind this was completely indescribable. Andre didn't care about Maurice's little movements. He pointed to the remaining notes and said, "These are for Mia. If I'm not wrong, she should be with old Bernie's grandson, Patty. Remember to be careful when you send the letter. The Ratman's emotions haven't been very stable recently. It's best not to provoke them if it's not necessary." "Got it, I'll do it right away." Maurice quickly took the notes and stuffed them into the bottomless cleavage in front of her chest. Then she swayed her slender waist and plump buttocks, pushed open the door, and walked out. She seemed to have gotten used to using her beautiful body as a weapon. No matter when or where, she would never forget to show her most seductive side. Glancing at the beautiful scenery that disappeared in the corridor, Andre once again took out the map that he got from the smuggler Tim. He carefully looked at the few secret passages that were marked with red lines that led directly to the sea. He didn't notice at all that when Maurice left, the black shadow hiding in the cupboard quietly came out and was moving toward the dining table. The sharp dagger in his hand was glowing with a strange black light. He didn't need to know that the dagger was smeared with a lethal poison that could kill upon contact with blood. Obviously, this guy wanted to take advantage of the time when Maurice left to get rid of the enemy in the room. Because he was wearing special soft-soled boots, when he stepped on the floor, he didn't make any sound. He very smoothly came to a position about half a meter behind Andre. Then, without hesitation, he swung his weapon and fiercely stabbed toward the brain stem above the neck. His skillful technique was admirable. Generally speaking, most of the ambushes from the back were aimed at the heart, kidneys, or trachea, which were more obvious places. Only those elite assassins who had slaughtered countless lives would understand that the brain stem above the neck was the only part that could truly deliver a fatal blow. This was the place where the nerve nucleus and the spine connected. It was responsible for controlling the heartbeat, breathing, digestion, and other vital life support functions. Once it was heavily injured, the target wouldn't even have the ability to scream or react. They would die on the spot. Even if they didn't die immediately, they would be paralyzed because of the loss of control of the spine. Coupled with the terrible poison, even if the dwarves were exceptionally tenacious, it was impossible for them to still be alive and kicking after being pierced. But unfortunately, the assassin this time encountered Andre, who had always been vigilant. Before the poisoned dagger touched his skin, he immediately sensed the danger. He immediately activated the force wall stored in the ring without hesitation. Bang! The sharp dagger fiercely hit the invisible wall, making a muffled sound, followed by a scream. Ah! The assassin was holding his right hand and kneeling on the ground with a thump. His wrist was strangely bent at 90 degrees, as if it was fractured. Chapter 861. It had to be said that the scene in front of him was a little strange. The assailant was lying on the ground in pain, while the victim was innocently watching from the side. Just as Andre was considering whether to kick the guy's head or tie him up with the animated rope, the originally closed door was suddenly kicked open. Following that, a dozen people with sharp blades rushed in. The one who commanded them was none other than Maurice, who had just gone out to pass the message. This shrewish woman did not hesitate like Andre. As soon as she entered the door, she immediately rushed forward. First, she kicked the poison dagger far away. Then, she raised her leg and kicked the assassin's lower body. Her kick was so accurate that it seemed to have been tempered thousands of times. All the men present could not help but feel a dull pain in their lower body. As she kicked, she cursed loudly, "Son of a b*****, you dare to kill my men. Do you think that by hiding the corpse and sprinkling sulfur, I won't be able to smell the blood? This little trick, I could see through it when I was 16. There was no doubt that Maurice had discovered something strange when she left. However, she did not immediately turn back. Instead, she went downstairs to call for help. Obviously, this was a correct judgment. Under the premise that they did not know how many enemies had sneaked in, the best choice was not to shout, but to immediately inform more people. After all, the reason why assassins were feared by people was because of their mysteriousness. The victims would often die an unnatural death without anyone knowing. However, once they were exposed, their deterrence was far less than that of a warrior. Looking at the fate of the unlucky guy on the ground, it was undoubtedly the best example. Due to the terrible blow to his lower body, the assassin instantly curled up into a ball like a cooked shrimp. White foam kept coming out of his mouth, and his two legs twitched uncontrollably. He didn't even have the strength to howl in pain. He was now like a fish on the chopping board, at the mercy of others. However, Andre did not have the intention to slaughter this guy immediately. Instead, he pulled back Maurice, who was about to kick him a few more times. "All right, stop kicking. If you continue, he will die suddenly. I still hope to get some useful information from him." "Bah, trash. Consider yourself lucky. I'll let you live a little longer." As the saying went, a valiant life did not need a reason. The furious Maurice did not care about the image of a lady that she usually maintained. She fiercely spat at the assassin, turned around, and sat on a chair. She used a sharp table knife to trim her nails. Her eyes were always looking at the assassin with ill intentions. Her gaze was like a butcher looking at a fattened livestock. The thugs surrounding the room had never seen their boss lose his temper like this. They all lowered their heads and remained silent, as if a flower had bloomed on the floor. The only thing left in the room was the killer's weak moans. Seeing that no one spoke, Andre waved at the orc warrior who led the charge. The latter felt a little confused, so he quickly pointed at his nose and asked, "You called me?" "That's right. You. Help me take off the mask and hood of that guy on the ground and wake him up," Andre ordered without any trace of politeness. "Oh, okay." The orc nodded in response. He immediately took 2 steps forward and pulled off the mask on the assassin's face. Then, he broke one of the assassin's fingers without saying a word. As the orc race was slightly lacking in intelligence, they especially did not like to think. Thus, when he heard the order, he reacted subconsciously and did not think of anything else. Crack! With a crisp sound, the unlucky guy who was in a semi-conscious state was instantly awakened by the intense pain. He let out a heart-wrenching scream. The orc obviously enjoyed the feeling of torturing others. He opened his mouth and laughed loudly. He's awake. Do you need me to do anything else? For example, break the other 9 fingers or something like that? No, not at the moment. If I need you later, I'll let you know. Thank you. Andre rejected the orc's suggestion with a smile. He did not dare to let this careless fellow in front of him interrogate the captive. Otherwise, the captive might be tortured to death in a short while. All right, what a bummer. The orc shrugged his shoulders and threw the pained assassin on the ground. He returned to his original position and stood properly. Andre did not pay attention to the orc's complaints. Instead, he stared at the unfamiliar and slightly old face of the captive. After a full minute, he asked, "Who are you? Why did you initiate an assassination? Who ordered you to do this? For the sake of your safety, I advise you not to play any tricks. Answer my questions honestly. Otherwise, I guarantee that the pain just now was just an appetizer." Bah! The assassin obviously did not intend to speak. He spat fiercely and tried to use provocation to quickly free himself from death. Without a doubt, his bones were very hard. He had definitely received strict torture training. Ordinary pain was not enough to make him speak. "Ha ha! It seems like he doesn't appreciate your kindness. How about it? Do you need me to help him loosen his bones?" Maris mocked, taking pleasure in his misfortune. No need. I'm pressed for time. I don't have time to interrogate a professionally trained assassin. You should know that not all information needs to be tortured. Many times, a small spell can change the opponent's mind. As he spoke, Andre took a few steps back. He stretched out his 10 nimble fingers and drew a circle in the air. Following that, he began to chant a spell. After a short few seconds, 2 balls of pink energy quickly gathered in the air. Even an idiot could tell that this was an extremely powerful spell. No one wanted their thoughts to be controlled. Thus, the captive struggled to stand up and violently slammed forward, trying to use this method to interrupt the spell-casting process. But he clearly forgot that there was a strong warrior behind him. Before he could stand firm, the orc took 2 steps forward and used his strong arms to strangle his neck. No matter how hard he struggled, he could not break free. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Andre quickly completed the spell. He stretched out his finger and lightly touched the assassin's forehead. All the pink fog rushed into his nose, ears, and mouth. After a second or two, an unbelievable scene happened. The assassin, who would rather die than submit, elbowed the half-orc warrior. Then, he knelt on the ground and kissed Andre's boots. "Great master, your servant Adamagaz is at your service." Chapter 862. How is this possible? Marie stood up from her chair in shock, letting out a cry of disbelief. It wasn't just her. The other 10 or so people all showed expressions of fear, especially the orc warrior. He retreated all the way to the door. Looking at his posture, it seemed that he was ready to escape once he realized that the situation wasn't good. No one in this world was an idiot. Even the stupidest person understood how terrifying it was to have one's consciousness controlled by someone else. That was why spellcasters were revered and feared by people. After all, they who couldn't learn magic would never understand how those mysterious magic could control the brain and even the soul. Seeing these people's expressions, Andre smiled and lightly kicked away the assassin who was crazily kissing his boots. He asked in return, "Why is it impossible? You should know that I just used a rank 5 arcane spell, Dominate Human. It's not like those low-level enchantment spells that can only temporarily create some false illusions to deceive the target. Instead, it can truly tamper with the central nervous system of the brain, weaving a memory from birth to now, and make the target believe it without a doubt. You see, this captive who was still stubborn a few seconds ago now sees me as his only family, friend, and master. Even if I were to order him to commit suicide, he would do it without hesitation. Remember, in front of arcane spells, nothing is impossible. The reason it's impossible is only because I haven't found the corresponding method yet. That's all. Maurice stared coldly at the assassin, who called himself Adam Agaz. Seeing him get kicked away again and again, getting up again and again, crazily kissing Andre's boots, she couldn't help but shiver. She sighed to herself, "My God, this is simply too terrifying." Although the scene looked very comical at first glance and was full of humor, no one present could laugh, because they couldn't help but put themselves in the shoes of that pitiful assassin. In their minds, they kept thinking about what they would do if they also had a day like this. It must be known that human nature was an extremely complicated and strange thing. On one hand, it madly worshipped those who stood at the top of the pyramid, but on the other hand, it sympathized and pitted those who were trampled under the feet of the strong. It was precisely this contradiction that formed the coexistence of cruel competition and high moral standards in human society. Obviously, the powerful effect of controlling humans made the assassin seem small and pitiful. Although everyone present was his enemy, they still subconsciously felt a strong sense of sympathy for him. However, Andre didn't care about this. He'd already seen the reverence that commoners had for mages back in Linton City, so he calmly said to Adam Agaz in front of everyone, "Tell me everything you know." "Yes, master. I'm an instructor at the assassin training base under the guild. Usually, I train the elites of the leaders. Be it Yi Xiao or Yulik, they're all outstanding graduates of the base." The assassin who was controlled by the spell completely regarded the young man in front of him as his only master. Without any hesitation, he revealed one of the biggest secrets of the guild. "Training base? Where is it located? Within Valence City?" Andre furrowed his brows and immediately asked. Adam Agaz shook his head. "No, it's not on Valen Island, but on Shuangyu Island 3 nautical miles away." Shuangyu Island? Andre had obviously never heard of this name before. He looked at the others, hoping that someone could explain it to him. Maurice lowered her head in thought for a few seconds before slamming the table and yelling, "I remember now. That's an island that isn't marked on the map. It's to the west of Valence City and is covered in reefs and undercurrents. Larger ships won't be able to pass through at all, so no one lives there." Andre nodded thoughtfully, "So that's how it is. They're quite careful to secretly build the training base in such a desolate and uninhabited place." "No, master. The reason why the leaders were so careful to hide this secret is because Shuangyu Island has a secret underwater tunnel that leads to Valence City. It starts from the secret underground room of the guild headquarters and stretches for several kilometers. The end point is the underground training ground. Apart from the leaders, only 2 other instructors and I know of this secret." As Adam Agaz blurted out these words, everyone present was so shocked that they were speechless. Especially Maurice, who was completely stupefied. She couldn't stop muttering, How? How is this possible? That they actually dug through 2 islands that's over 5 kilometers long. She couldn't be blamed for making a fuss over nothing. Even Andre, a transmigrator, was quite shocked. One had to know that even in the 21st century, building an underwater tunnel wasn't an easy task. The cost of 1 kilometer was often 1 or 2 billion. Even though the underground tunnel dug by the Underground Guild couldn't possibly be as wide as the ones on Earth, it was still an impossible task with the engineering standards of this world, even if it could only allow 2 people to walk side by side. There is no need to ask to know that they must have borrowed the power of magic. Thinking of this, Andre immediately said, "Give me a detailed introduction of this tunnel. Who built it and when it was completed?" Adam Agaz muttered to himself for a moment before shaking his head with a bitter smile. "I'm sorry, master. I only know that it existed a long time ago. The guild was only the discoverer, not the builder. It seems that only the leaders of the past generations know the secret. In addition, when entering the tunnel, you have to bring a living thing as a sacrifice, such as a rabbit, sheep, cat, dog, and so on. You have to kill it at the altar at the entrance. Otherwise, you'll get lost in the pitch-black tunnel. I've walked through it twice, and I only felt as if there was a pair of terrifying eyes staring at me in the darkness. Hearing the killer's bizarre explanation, Andre instantly realized that this tunnel wasn't ordinary at all. He even had the urge to immediately investigate it. Unfortunately, he was pressed for time and didn't have the time to explore it. He could only sigh helplessly. Sigh, looks like we can only put the matter of this secret tunnel aside for now. I reckon that it'll take a long time to uncover the secret within. That's right. There's no need to rush the matter of the tunnel. Now that we have the escape route of the guild leaders, we can completely destroy it in one fell swoop. Marie stood up excitedly and slammed the table fiercely. It was as if she could already see the scene of the high and mighty guild leaders crawling at her feet and begging for mercy. She became exceptionally excited. Chapter 863. Someone once said that if you wanted to destroy an organization, you had to first destroy their upper echelons. This was because the upper echelons were equivalent to the brains of the entire organization. Once they lost control of the brain, the organization would descend into chaos and disorder and eventually wither away. After obtaining Adam Agaz as a guide, Andre immediately launched an encirclement and annihilation against the underground guilds without hesitation. Not only did he order the allied noble army, which had only rested for a few hours, to launch a fierce attack on the guild headquarters in the upper city district, he also notified the small guilds in the lower city district, as well as a few other members of the Shadow Net, to go from house to clean up the spies planted by the guild. In an instant, the entire Valence city was in chaos. Even the dumbest of citizens knew that the sky was about to change. After all, in order to reduce his own casualties, Count George didn't choose to directly attack the guild headquarters, which was riddled with traps. Instead, he ordered Bartholomew to set up several cannons on the streets, aiming at the targets and firing wildly. The loud explosions rang through the sky. Anyone who wasn't deaf would be able to hear them clearly. The guild members who had been hiding by the windows and behind the walls, preparing to launch a sneak attack, never expected such a powerful weapon to appear. They didn't even have time to react before they suffered heavy casualties. They were either killed by the solid bullets or flattened by the collapsed stone walls and pillars. The scene was a tragic mess. After a few rounds of bombardment, the three-story stone building made of piled marble was riddled with holes and beyond recognition. More accurately, it would be more appropriate to call it a ruin. The third floor had completely collapsed, and the second floor was also on the verge of collapse. Only the first floor looked relatively intact, but that was only in terms of the supporting structure. Ha ha ha, this thing is really awesome. Old George laughed happily as he looked at the corpses strewn across the ground and the guild headquarters that had almost been plowed flat. The more he looked at the cannons, the more envious he became. He couldn't wait to drag a few away and install them on his own ships, castles, and manors. Count, please allow me to remind you that if we continue to bombard them, we might not be able to find the entrance to the basement, Wilson reminded him in a low voice. Ever since they had a disagreement over the manuscript of Master Swordsman Johannes, the relationship between the two had become a little delicate. Although they still maintained a close master-servant relationship on the surface, they knew very well that this rift would never disappear. If it was not handled well, it would even grow bigger. However, old George wasn't in the mood to think about this at the moment. He immediately raised his right arm and motioned for the cannons to stop firing. He then said, "Order the soldiers to attack. I hope to end the battle within half an hour." "As you wish, Count." Wilson placed one hand on his chest and bowed. He turned around and waved at the army behind him. The knights who were in charge of commanding quickly divided the 100-man square formation into 20-man squads and rushed into the dilapidated building from all directions. Not long after, the sound of fierce fighting, screams, and howls could be heard from inside. Needless to say, they must have encountered the remaining guild members and had engaged in a fierce battle with them. However, these sounds didn't last long. After less than 15 minutes, it was completely quiet. After a short while, more than 30 mutilated corpses were carried out and left on the empty street. Under the suppression of absolute quantity and quality, these so-called elite thieves and assassins didn't even have a chance to show off their skills. They only caused less than 50 casualties before they were besieged and killed by dozens of knights. Their pitiful daggers and short swords couldn't even pierce through the solid armor and shields of the knights. After eliminating the remaining enemies, the soldiers began to search in the huge and complicated basement. After 3 to 5 minutes, a messenger ran out and shouted, "Found it! Found it!" At the end of the basement, I found the secret room that was sealed with steel plates. Is that so? Looks like our mission is completed. Old George narrowed his eyes and said to himself. An elderly noble obviously didn't quite understand the meaning behind this and asked curiously, "Count, don't we need to think of a way to pry open the steel plates?" Old George smiled and shook his head. "No, there's no need. Like I said, our mission is complete. The rest will be left to Sir Andre. I'm sure he'll be very satisfied with our efficiency." Less than half an hour after the fall of the guild headquarters, a small winter wolf boat with 5 people on board landed on the beach of Xuanyu Island, 3 nautical miles west of Allen City. As soon as he jumped off the boat, Andre couldn't wait to ask, "This is Xuanyu Island? It looks rather desolate, and there's pitifully little vegetation. I don't think there's any drinkable water either. I really don't understand why they would think of building a training base here." "Master, Xuanyu Island doesn't look like much on the surface, but there's a whole other world underground. Not only is there an underground river, there's also a large number of strange fish that don't have eyes. It's enough to sustain the daily needs. As long as we send some flour, salt, clothes, and other daily necessities, the entire base can sustain the training of 100 apprentices." The second person to jump off the boat, Adam Agaz, hurried over and explained in detail. It could be seen that he was in a rather good state. His broken wrist and severely injured lower body had been completely healed by nature magic, and he was following beside him loyally. The third person to jump off the boat was Maurice. She looked at the assassin whose memories had been tampered with pity and stepped onto the golden beach without saying a word. As for the last ones to leave the boat, they were Andre's 2 capable servants, the demonkin warrior Eunice and the elven druid Nina, as well as her animal companion. After briefly observing the island reef that was less than 3 square kilometers in circumference, Andre immediately instructed Adam Agaz, "Don't waste time. Take me directly to the underground training base." Calculating the time, the leaders of the underground guilds should be halfway to the undersea tunnel by now. We have to quickly clean up those who are in the way and hold a grand, welcoming ceremony for them. Heh, don't worry, my master, because the leaders just ordered the entire training base to be mobilized a few hours ago and launch an unrestricted assassination of the lower city. There aren't many people who are a threat apart from a teacher and a dozen or so rookies who haven't graduated yet. You don't even have to do it yourself. I can slaughter them all myself. After saying this, a twisted and sickly smile appeared on the assassin's face. It looked abnormally sinister and terrifying. "Oh, is that so? Then it looks like I can save some effort." The corner of Andre's mouth drew an arc, and he turned to Eunice and said, "Did you hear that clearly? You have 5 minutes to clean up the inside. You could do whatever you want this time, but remember to make the scene a little bloody. I hope to give the guests who are about to arrive a surprise." Hee. I'm very happy to carry out this order. A bloodthirsty smile appeared on the half-demon's face. Chapter 865. The people standing on the other side clearly hadn't expected a stranger to appear and froze on the spot, completely unsure of how to respond to this greeting. Of course, apart from the greeting, the dismembered corpses and blood on the ground was also one of the reasons why they were incomparably shocked. 2 of the women couldn't stand the smell of blood that assaulted their nostrils and directly leaned against the wall to vomit, even spitting out dark green bile. However, Andre clearly didn't intend to display his gentlemanly demeanor at this moment, and very subtly made an attack gesture. Elven druid Nina, who'd been waiting for a long time, instantly leapt up and pounced on the guy closest to her. The wolf pack behind her also darted out from the dark corners, attempting to pounce on the remaining people and end this battle as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, the 6 guild leaders weren't as easy to deal with as they appear to be. Just as the wolf pack charged out, 2 magic puppets over 3 meters tall and completely forged from steel charged out from the dark passageway. They swung their sandbag-sized fists and sent one of the berserk wolves flying. Because it was a summoned creature, the wolf didn't explode into a bloody mess after receiving damage that exceeded its body's limits and quickly disappeared into thin air. Whoa, looks like our esteemed guest is well prepared. What do you plan to do? Eunice whistled and asked with a face full of ridicule. She didn't seem nervous at all and was even in the mood to joke around. Of course, Andre didn't seem nervous at all and replied with a light smile. Of course we'll do what we need to do. It's just 2 shield guards mass-produced by the Magic Kingdom, Gorlers. They shouldn't be enough to scare you, right? Moreover, these 6 people aren't the ones who created them, but rather controlled them through some kind of magical tool. As long as we remove all the things emitting energy waves from their bodies, the shield guards will definitely stop moving. Now go and help me take care of this little problem. I believe it should be very easy for you. Remember, I want him alive. Don't kill him by accident. With that, not only did Andre have no intention of making a move, he sat back in his chair and looked at the battle taking place not far in front of him with a gaze full of mockery. He didn't find it strange at all that the guild leaders had a trump card in their hands. After all, they'd controlled Valen City for hundreds of years. It would be strange if they didn't have anything. The only thing he didn't expect was that this trump card was actually 2 giant, inferior steel puppets. It was truly laughable. Shield guards, also known as the all-purpose steel defensive construct, were developed by the high-ranked mages of the Gorlers Kingdom. They were a simplified version of the true magic golem, with a large amount of magic immunity and only retained the strong resistance of steel. Therefore, they were extraordinarily easy to manufacture and also very cheap. Just from a name, they were mainly used to provide 24-hour protection for the rich of the rich nobles and merchants' ants. There's TSS, and even if they have a strong est, they T to the point twos, and even if there's TSS, Ts. Therefore, from the moment these things were created, they were targeted for foreign trade. In other words, they were sold at high prices to areas where magic wasn't very developed, in exchange for gold coins, rare materials, slaves, and so on that mages needed. Andre was willing to bet that the guild leaders must have paid a considerable price to buy these 2 shield guard from the extremely cunning Gorlers mages. They simply didn't know that special magical creations like constructs always had to abide by 2 laws. First, any construct, including magic golems, must first obey its own creator. Only then would it obey the orders of a second person according to the creator's instructions. Alternatively, it could create a magical item that could replace instructions, and the person holding the item would have a second level of control. Simply put, even if someone spent money to buy a magic golem, the creator of the magic golem would only need to give an order to make it change sides in an instant. Second, the vast majority of constructs, including magic golems, didn't have the ability to think and only relied on their instincts to fight. If they wanted to exert their full combat power, they needed a series of outstanding commands and spell coordination. Otherwise, they would be a big, stupid fool that couldn't even climb out a pit by itself. Obviously, the creator of the shield guards couldn't have run for more than 2,000 nautical miles to the Sardinia Islands just to sell 2 constructs. They must have been sold by those guys who specialized in overseas trade. This also meant that if the buyer wanted to control the shield guards, they had to have a controller. Once they got the controller, the shield guards would instantly betray them. In addition, the guild leaders didn't have much experience in commanding puppets to fight. Looking at the shield guards' clumsy movements, they knew that it would be difficult to hit targets that were slightly more agile. To sum up, the guild leaders' trump cards were no threat to Andre. They had spent a lot of money to buy 2-time bombs, and now it was finally time to detonate them. Well, I'll try my best to be careful and not kill them. With that, a trace of mockery flashed in Eunice's eyes, and she raised her hand to send a flying kiss to one of the men. This unlucky fellow, who was caught off guard, immediately trembled involuntarily. Then, he was captured by her charm ability and raised his fist to smash his companion's head. The latter felt a sharp pain and then fell to the ground with a groan of pain. At the same time, Nina also gave full play to the power of the Wolfpack tactic. Not only did she make the clumsy shield guards run in circles, but she also bit the legs of 2 people under their protection. At a glance, they were badly mutilated, and the victims couldn't even stand up. It must be known that the shield guards, who relied on their instincts, reacted half a beat slower to begin with. In addition, the leaders were too afraid, so they limited them to a certain distance. Once they exceeded that distance, they would immediately order them to stop chasing. Therefore, the situation had already shown a clear decline in less than 2 minutes. Taking advantage of the chaos, Adam Agaz silently snuck into the area protected by the puppets. He decisively cut off the wrist of one of the puppets and snatched 2 runic stones glowing with a green light from the other party's palm. Without any hesitation, he directly threw out the 2 stones and shouted, "Master, catch!" This is the magic device used to control the shield guards. Andre didn't say a word and caught it in his palm. He smiled and nodded. Hee. Well done. Now it's time to end this boring battle and let the underground guild become the dust of history. Chapter 866. Adam Agaz, you traitor. Look at what you've done. The man who was in charge of controlling the shield-bearer roared in disbelief as he clutched his wrist that was spurting blood. He couldn't believe that one of his most trusted subordinates would choose to betray him at such a critical moment. Moreover, the betrayal was so thorough that there was no room for negotiation. The assassin sneered as he stared at the powerful leader and mocked. Traitor? No, you're wrong. I've been a loyal servant of my master since the beginning. He was the one who told me to infiltrate the guild and wait for the right time to catch all of you in one fell swoop. Under my master's great wisdom, all of you are as stupid as goblins. It was obvious that he firmly believed in the false memories created by the dominate human spell, at least until the effects of the spell completely disappeared. The leaders were stunned. If they remember correctly, Adam Agaz had joined the guild when he was 6 years old. If what he said was true, it meant that he had been trained to be an excellent spy before he was 5 years old. It wasn't just the leaders who didn't believe it. Even those with a little brain wouldn't believe it. However, the assassin who was under the spell didn't doubt it at all. His eyes even revealed a smug expression, as if he had completed a very impressive mission. Maurice resisted the urge to laugh out loud as she whispered to Andre, "How long will he be in this state? A few hours? A few days? A few months? Or a lifetime?" It's hard to explain. In short, it varies from person to person, depending on the level of the caster and the resistance of the target to mind control spells. Some people will wake up in a minute or 2, while others will need a few hours. There are also some stubborn fellows who will treat the implanted memories as real and never wake up. Andre shrugged as he explained. To be honest, even he didn't expect that a mere level 5 spell, Dominate Human, would control Adam Agaz for so long. He didn't even have time to use his backup plan. If he wakes up, what do you plan to do with him? Kill him? Or, after all, he helped you solve a lot of problems, didn't he? Maris teased with a meaningful smile. Andre glanced at the assassins who were tying up the captives with ropes and shook his head. No, my dear Maris. What really helped me was not Adam Agaz, but the level 5 Arcane spell, Dominate Humans. In other words, I used magic to help me solve the problem, so he had no value. What's more, it's not like he didn't see his attitude towards us before. For a guy like him who has been groomed by the guild since young, even if he had no choice but to surrender, would you dare to take him in? In any case, I don't dare to keep such an unstable factor by my side. Who knows, at any moment, he might launch a fatal blow when you're unprepared. Wow, so cold and heartless. but I have to admit that what you said makes sense. Adam Agaz definitely can't be kept. As she spoke, a cold light flashed in Maris' eyes. While the two were talking, the curtains of the battle had already been drawn. Apart from a few berserk wolves that were destroyed by the terrifying strength of the shield-bearers, the rest of the captives didn't even lose a single strand of hair. Especially Eunice, who had half the demon bloodline. She only released 2 of her innate abilities, charm, and succeeded in making a third of the enemies turn their backs. In order to prevent a portion of the captives from dying from excessive blood loss, the elven druid Nina specially performed simple treatment on those who were more seriously injured, and then brought them all in front of Andre. Maurice's vanity was greatly satisfied when she saw these high and mighty leaders kneeling in front of her like stray dogs. Although she really wanted to take 2 steps forward and use her sharp words to mock the other party and take revenge for all the humiliation she had suffered, she did not do so in the end. The reason was very simple. She was now somewhat in awe of the seemingly harmless Andre beside her. Whenever she thought of those endless magic spells, she felt a chill in her heart. "Master, do you need me to introduce them to you?" Adam Agaz didn't notice the strange atmosphere in the air and stood out to ask politely. No need. I'm not interested in knowing the names of a group of dead people. Eunice, I'll leave them all to you, dead or alive. I only want information. Andre didn't care about the captives' feelings at all, and said something that made their faces change greatly on the spot. In Oraire, losing a power struggle meant death. No one was an exception. Even the nobles who had perfect self-protection mechanisms were no exception. The only difference was that the nobles could choose a more dignified way to die, such as drinking, indulging in sex, taking poison, and so on. But it was a pity that the leaders of the guilds couldn't enjoy such treatment. What awaited them was cruel interrogation, and only when the last bit of value was squeezed out would they be granted a merciful death. When a woman wearing a veil heard the word death, she hurriedly struggled to tear off her veil, revealing a very beautiful face. She begged bitterly, "No, no, no, please don't kill me. I'll do anything for you. I also know all the secrets of the guilds, including where the treasures are buried, branches set up in other ports." "Oh, anything? Are you serious, beautiful lady?" Andre stretched out his right hand and gently stroked the woman's white and delicate cheeks, slender neck, and finally stopped at the bottomless ravine on her chest. Although this action was full of provocation, if one looked closely at his eyes, they would be able to see that they were as clear as a lake, without the slightest bit of desire. Yes, I'm willing to offer my body and soul. I vow to be your slave forever." Under the fear of death, this woman in her early 30s, full of mature charm, didn't notice her situation at all. She kept rubbing her proud bosom against Andre's leg, tried to use her body to attract the attention of the young man in front of her. It had to be said that her approach was very smart, because many men like to ravage the other party's wife, woman, and lover after defeating the enemy to satisfy their desire to conquer. Usually, as long as they could have a physical relationship with them, it meant that they could survive. However, Andre was obviously not in this category. He stretched out a finger and gently placed it on the woman's lips and said with a smile, "Beautiful lady, although you are very attractive, I still have to apologize. In my future plans, there is no place for you." Chapter 867. Perhaps he was cold and unromantic, but Andre had undoubtedly made the right choice. He would rather restrain his physical urges and his desire for indulgence than leave any future problems for his huge plan. Moreover, he had let the woman in front of him enjoy the feeling of falling from heaven to hell. Calmness and rationality were qualities that a person in power had to possess. When necessary, even humanity had to be temporarily abandoned. This was because only by discarding all emotional interference could one make the most advantageous decisions. Just as a scholar had once said, only when a king gave up on family, love, and friendship, and only considered problems from the perspective of benefits and schemes, Would he be a qualified king and be supported by countless people? Although Andre wasn't a king yet, he was already a feudal lord with a territory and subjects. Furthermore, he was in the process of establishing a massive trade alliance that would cover the entire Southern Sea region. His every action would affect countless people, including the families behind them. Therefore, while he enjoyed his rights, he also had to shoulder the corresponding responsibilities and obligations. Ha ha! Did you hear that? You lowly whore. You actually want to seduce Master? Why don't you take a good look in the mirror? Do you think you can avoid death just because you're a little prettier? Dream on. Eunice laughed sinisterly, grabbing the woman's hair and forcefully dragging her back, completely ignoring her terrified screams and struggles. As this female leader was wearing a rather loose lavender dress, it quickly fell off her body during the process of being dragged, revealing her sexy underwear and large patches of tender white skin. She was filled with an indescribable temptation, making one have the urge to rush up and ravage her. Seeing the half-demon's actions becoming more and more violent, Andre sighed slightly and reminded, Eunice, be gentle. If this lady is willing to take the initiative to tell us everything, then let her die a quick death. I don't wish to see such a beautiful body mangled into a bloody mess. Also, get rid of that troublesome person while you're at it. He's useless now. Hee. Don't worry, dear master. I'll use the most gentle way to dote on her and let her die in extreme happiness. After saying that, Eunice bent down and stuck out her tongue to lick his lips. Then, her two scarlet eyes released a ray of light. Her actions made the woman who was still struggling immediately calm down. The fear on her face gradually disappeared and was replaced with infatuation. Then, she opened her sexy lips and began to respond fiercely. Andre enjoyed the scene of the two beautiful women kissing with great interest. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly, revealing a trace of playfulness. As a mage, he could easily feel the changes in magical energy. Thus, he did not even need to ask to confirm that Eunice had used some kind of innate ability similar to the kiss of the succubus. To an ordinary person, this was an irresistible temptation. Although a large amount of the victim's life force would be absorbed during the kiss, they would also obtain unprecedented spiritual satisfaction. Unknowingly, they would lose their lives. Just as Andre had expected, in just a few seconds, the mature female leader started to age at a speed visible to the naked eye. She went from looking like she was in her early 30s to around 40 years old, and crow's feet appeared at the corners of her eyes. On the other hand, Eunice's face was glowing, as if she had absorbed some kind of life essence. Even her skin had a strange luster to it. Just as everyone was looking at this scene in shock, she suddenly raised the king's blood sword and slashed towards Adamagaz, who was only a step away from her. Adamagaz did not have time to dodge at all. He could only watch as a cold light flashed and his head separated from his neck. With a gurgle, his head rolled to the ground, blood spurting out more than a meter into the air before his headless corpse fell to the ground. Because everything had happened too quickly and too suddenly, everyone was dumbfounded. This was especially so for the guild leaders kneeling on the ground. They did not understand why Adamagaz, who had betrayed them, had been killed. Feeling the rain of blood on her body, Eunice quickly revealed an enchanting smile. She placed one hand on her chest and slightly bowed. The trouble you mentioned has been dealt with. Now, it's time for my personal favorite interrogation. I hope that the sounds that might appear in a while will not affect your appetite. I said that I'll leave them to you. I don't care if they're dead or alive. I only want information. Andre was still as calm as ever, as if he had not seen anything. Let's go, my little cutie. Let's find a place where there's no one else and have a good time. After receiving a positive answer, Eunice immediately became unscrupulous. She pulled the woman beside her and walked straight towards the underground river. After a short while, there were short breaths and seductive moans coming from inside. There was no need to ask to know what they were doing inside. Maurice glanced at the deepest part of the underground river with a strange expression. She then asked softly, "This subordinate of yours seems to like women." "Women? Andre's mouth could not help but twitch. He quickly shook his head. I'm not too sure. Perhaps. I'm not interested in the private lives of my subordinates. However, rather than saying that Eunice likes women, it's more accurate to say that she has an uncontrollable urge for sex. I think that both men and women should be within her hunting range. Wow, looks like I have to wish her a good time. After all, there's still 5 guys for her to slowly enjoy. Maurice looked at the leaders with eyes full of pity. She could almost imagine how tragic the fate of being squeezed to death by a half-demon with a strong physique would be. In truth, when it came to sexual prowess, humans could not compare to the powerful otherworld life forms. Forget about pure succubi or lustful demons. Even those with half or even 1/3 of their bloodline could easily make a squad of professional soldiers lose their ability to fight in bed. It was said that a true demon lord could do it continuously for months or years. In just 1 or 2 years, he could create hundreds or thousands of descendants and use them to consolidate his brutal rule. This was also why Andre did not take action despite having many opportunities to experience the taste of a succubus that was said to be able to send men to paradise. He did not want to have a relationship with a member of the opposite sex that he could never conquer. It would hurt his pride as a man. Chapter 868. Even though Eunice had all sorts of shortcomings, such as being irritable, easily angered, neurotic, and extremely passionate about killing and torturing her enemies, there was one thing that Andre was extremely satisfied with, and that was her efficiency that others could not hope to match. In less than half an hour, she had pried open the mouths of all 6 captives. Whether it was the location of the buried treasure or the secret subordinate organizations, everything was laid out on a few pieces of sheepskin. Even the jewelry worn by the leaders, the money pouches they carried with them, and the golden teeth embedded in their mouths were not spared. It could be said that she had thoroughly scraped the ground. Looking at the 2 golden teeth on the table, the corner of Andre's mouth twitched unconsciously. He then forced out a satisfied smile. Very good. I am very satisfied with the results of your interrogation. I believe that these are their final trump cards. Now that they are in my hands, I can add another sum of money for the future construction of the Sardinia Islands. As for the secret gathering points set up at the ports in the south, don't touch them for now. Continue to use the guild's original method of control and infiltration. When the time is right, replace the original people. Remember, don't act rashly and alert the enemy, and don't let them know what happened in Valen City. Don't worry, I know my limits. The question is, who do you intend to give it to? You have to know that there are over 15 secret gathering points, covering almost all of the busy port cities in the south. With such a large scale, it won't be easy to swallow them all in one go. Eunice was very clear that she couldn't do any work related to management. She had always been very clear about her position, and that was to charge and break through enemy lines or interrogate captives. Thus, she directly raised the most important question, and that was who would take over these secret gathering points with complicated backgrounds. What do you think of me? The ambitious Maris seemed to feel that this was a good opportunity and immediately came forward to recommend herself. You? Andre sized her up and quickly shook his head with a sneer. Ha ha, forget it. Unless you are willing to give up your position as the mayor of Valen City and swear to always be the companion of darkness and never appear under the sun again, I won't give you such an important task. Upon hearing that she would have to live in the shadows, Maris immediately gave up her original idea. She shrugged her shoulders awkwardly. Well, it seems that the darkness doesn't suit me. The position of mayor is still better. At least I can bask in the sun often, right? Andre ignored her muttering. He lowered his head and pondered for a few seconds before saying, Let's give Black Lily Bonnie a try first. Although her methods are still a little immature, it should be easier for her to manage these secret strongholds using the gang's methods. Eunice obviously didn't care who would take over this mess. She nodded and said, No problem. When do you need me to leave? Don't worry. After we deal with the pirates, I'll immediately send a fast ship to send you back to Linden City. According to the news I received not long ago, the pirate King Francis fleet will arrive at the Sardinia Islands the day after tomorrow at the latest. At that time, I'll need your help." As he spoke, Andre's eyes revealed a meaningful light. Although he didn't say anything substantial, Maris still felt a chill run down her spine. She didn't even dare to ask about the treasure that she was most interested in. "Is an assassination?" The corners of Eunice's mouth curled up slightly, and there was an unconcealable excitement on her face. Even the tail hidden behind the cloak kept swaying left and right. It was as if an assassination was not an extremely dangerous mission for her, but a kind of excitement and enjoyment. "That's right, it's an assassination. I'll hold a grand welcoming ceremony. At that time, I'll use a magic potion to temporarily change your appearance. Then, you'll take advantage of the revelry to kill Francis as soon as possible. Let the pirates fall into an uncontrollable chaos and annihilate all of them near the port." Andre had no intention of hiding it and openly admitted it. Ever since he heard the news of the pirates' return, he had come up with countless plans in his mind. In the end, he realized that assassination was the best way to increase the success rate while reducing his casualties. After all, the pirates themselves were only a loose alliance. Once the most prestigious pirate king died, the remaining captains would definitely not submit to anyone and would not be able to organize an effective resistance. Furthermore, they were naturally undisciplined, so it wouldn't take much effort to deal with them. Andre finally understood why so many people in history liked to use assassination to resolve conflicts. Even if the success rate was shockingly low, it couldn't hide the fact that low investment and high returns were high. What did an assassination require? It was nothing more than an assassin with outstanding martial skills, a sharp weapon, and a strictly calculated location. That was all. But look at what kind of people had died at their hands. Kings, dukes, generals, great nobles, wealthy merchants, the leaders of certain factions, and so on. Basically, all of them held high positions and were extremely wealthy. Normally speaking, to kill these people, one would need to mobilize at least thousands or even tens of thousands of professional soldiers. But with the advent of assassination, everything became simple and cheap. The only downside was that after being exposed, it was very easy for the other party to retaliate fiercely. One had to know that assassination wasn't the monopoly of one or two people. Anyone could use it, generally speaking. Unless the conflict between two parties was irreconcilable, no one would be willing to live in fear all day. It was very clear that from the moment he took down the highest fortress in Valen City, Andre had already decided to fight to the death with the pirates. Thus, he didn't need to worry about anything. In any case, he was confident that the enemy wouldn't have a chance to retaliate, so he chose to assassinate Francis without hesitation. Eunice gently stroked the king's blood sword, muttering to herself in a neurotic tone, "Endure. Endure for 2 more days. My dear partner, I promise that I'll let you drink the blood of your enemies to your heart's content." It had to be said that her appearance was quite lethal. Maris was so frightened that she hurriedly retreated, crying out in alarm, "Damn it! Is she crazy? She's actually talking to a sword." "Crazy? No, she's not crazy. You just don't understand. Let's go. We've already wasted a lot of time here. It's time to return to Valen City." With that, Andre threw the spoils of war on the table into his multidimensional bag and headed straight for the underwater tunnel. He was very clear that the king's blood sword wasn't a magic longsword in the ordinary sense. Not only had it been forged with the blood of the human king, William I, but it also had the fangs of a vampire count. It wasn't strange for it to have a faint self-awareness. Chapter 869. In Oraire, a world filled with supernatural powers, almost all kinds of strange things could happen. Some crazy blacksmiths would even inject their own will or a person's soul into a weapon in order to make it more powerful. Thus, many famous weapons in history had their own personality, and a small number of them could speak. This was also why many magic weapons had camp restrictions, profession restrictions, race restrictions, gender restrictions, and so on. It was because the weak self-consciousness within the weapon would reject those who did not meet the requirements. Under normal circumstances, the best choice was to change weapons. Otherwise, they might suffer a strong backlash, such as turning into a mindless idiot. The moment Andre obtained the king's blood sword, he understood that this was a weapon filled with blood and slaughter. Although it did not reject him, it was not suitable for him either. Thus, he did not hesitate to give it to Eunice, who was passionate about killing. Now, it seemed that the person and the sword got along quite well, and there was a subtle connection between them. This mysterious connection was something that Andre dreamed of observing and researching, so he did not have any intention of stopping it. Instead, he looked forward to future developments. Just like that, the group passed through the ancient entrance and arrived at an underground world filled with darkness and deathly stillness. The twisted magic power in the air, the pure darkness that even dark vision could not see through. There was also the bone-chilling sound of the wind. The elven druid Nina, who was very sensitive to the environment, quickly stepped forward and warned, "Master, please be careful. There seems to be something incredible hidden here. I can feel it. All the magic energy is being twisted by some unknown consciousness and is slowly flowing into the depths of the passage. It seems that we need to properly investigate the history of the Sardinia Islands when we return. I believe that there must be something hidden here." After saying that, Andre went straight to the altar next to the entrance and raised his head to look at the huge, strange statue in the center. Due to the passage of time, its facial features were already blurred. The only thing that could be distinguished was its snake-like body and head. Its two thick arms and claws were spread out, as if it wanted to hug something. Below the huge statue, there was a bowl made of polished stone. The top of the bowl was filled with unknown words. Not only were the words not weathered, but they were also faintly emitting a dark red light. There was a large amount of dried blood inside, indicating that there were often people slaughtering living creatures for sacrifice here. Eunice came closer, wrinkled her nose, and sniffed the air. Immediately, she said with a solemn expression, "This is not an ordinary blood sacrifice. It was a sacrifice of the soul. Any Holy Spirit killed in this stone bowl will never be able to enter the world of the dead again." Soul sacrifice? Ha! Andre chuckled. He stretched out his right hand and immediately unleashed a rank 0 arcana technique, reading magic. Very quickly, the originally incomprehensible hieroglyphs on the bowl instantly began to rearrange themselves. In just a few seconds, they had become the common language of the surface. Although some of the words were slightly incomprehensible, they could still be understood. "The great wizard Murdica, you possess unparalleled power. The great Maldija, you are the creator of the Sardinians. You are our supreme father, our mother. You have bestowed us with wisdom and life. We are willing to serve you wholeheartedly until the end of time. Sacrifice, sir. Please chant Murdica's holy name in your heart. Use the blood and souls of the sacrifices to please him. Otherwise, you will be devoured by the darkness." Wizard Murdica, the creator of the Sardinians? Things are getting more and more interesting. After understanding the gist of the hieroglyphs, an unfathomable expression appeared on Andre's face. Out of all the books he had read, there had never been any records of the wizard Murdica. Moreover, according to the thousands of years of history in the South, there had never been any Sardinians in the Sardinian Islands. This also meant that this passage had been built at least 10,000 years ago, before humans had walked out of the caves and started to establish a glorious magic civilization. It might even be related to the race of the Creator. What was the race of the Creator? According to the research of the elves and the legends left behind by the ancient humans, there have been a few glorious civilizations on this ancient continent tens of thousands of years ago. They possessed unbelievable technology and power. Even the Nagas, lizardmen, murlocs, octopuses, shape-shifting creatures, goblins, winged creatures, and so on had all been created by them. According to Andre's understanding, these fellows had used genetic technology to the peak of perfection. They could easily merge two completely unrelated species, such as humans and lizards, humans and snakes, humans and toads, humans and birds, and so on. The mysterious scroll that had caused the explosion of human magic civilization was also created by them. It was not an exaggeration to call them the creator. How valuable would a place that was related to the creator be? Even during the glorious magic civilization, it was enough to cause a huge commotion. No matter what was hidden in this underwater passage, its value could not be measured by money. I need a powerful collaborator. As a smart person, Andre was very clear that with his current strength, it was absolutely impossible to explore this mysterious place. Thus, he immediately thought of the legendary Lich, but quickly shifted his target to the half-elven archmage, Orlando. Just as he was hesitating about who to choose, Maurice pulled out a gray rabbit from a cage not far away, carried it into the stone bowl, and chopped off the poor little fellow's head. In an instant, the eyes of the stone statue released two terrifying red lights. The headless rabbit's corpse twitched violently. After a few seconds, a milky white, translucent soul slowly floated into the air and was finally sucked into the stone statue's mouth. Of course, this scene could only be seen by Andre, who had been maintaining the vision of the secret technique. The rest of the people could only feel a little strange at most. After doing all this, Maurice immediately heaved a sigh of relief. She turned around and shook off the bloodstains on her dagger. She asked, "Did I do something wrong? If I offer this sacrifice, does it mean that I can safely pass through this terrifying invisible passage?" Yes, at least that's what the guild leaders told us. If we don't want any accidents to happen, we'd better do as they say. With that, Eunice carried a rabbit to the front of the altar and used a tremendous force to forcefully break its neck. Chapter 870. Due to the real existence of demons, devils, and gods, the people of Orire had long been accustomed to things like faith and sacrifice. Even a peasant woman who did not know the common language could skillfully pray to the god she believed in. Therefore, once they encountered a situation related to gods, their first reaction was not to doubt, but to offer sacrifices according to the procedure. This was because in the stories circulating among the people, there were too many bloody lessons, and there was no lack of powerful spellcasters among them. However, these people often did not end well in the end. Some angered the gods, while others inadvertently offended powerful and terrifying monsters, such as dragons, devils, and demons. The revenge methods of the good gods were not bad. At most, they used their divine power to turn the target into a retard or an idiot. The means of the evil gods were much crueler. They would send down thunder and lightning to directly destroy the mortals who angered them. This was already considered a more comfortable way to die. At least it was fast enough, and there was not too much pain. The evil gods who controlled the domain of death and souls would even pull out the souls of the offenders and throw them into the country they created, where they would torture them for hundreds to thousands of years. Of course, there was no need to mention the demons and devils. The former's madness and brutality were obvious to all, and the latter were also evil beings with a strong, vengeful mentality. Falling into their hands was definitely 10,000 times more terrible than death. Countless bloody examples constantly reminded the people living on this land how miserable their end would be if they lost their reverence for the mysterious things. Therefore, before entering the underwater tunnel, everyone, including Andre and the winter wolf Michelle, killed a small animal in the stone bowl. After all, no one wanted to experience the feeling of being lost in the darkness. Looking at the 5 rabbits who died with their eyes open, Andre took a deep breath and said to the others behind him, "Let's go. Let's see what's so special about this tunnel." "Wait, I think it's a good choice to let these 2 blockheads walk in front. What do you think?" Maris carefully suggested as she pointed to the 2 shield bearers standing not far away. To be honest, as a cautious woman, if she could, she would rather take a boat back than walk through this so-called underwater tunnel. However, it was a pity that she did not have the ability to sail 3 nautical miles on her own. She could only brace herself and force herself to follow the others along the dark tunnel. Of course, if they can give you a little psychological comfort. However, I have to remind you that these emasculated versions of cheap goods are actually not as powerful as they look on the surface. If something really happens, I'm afraid they won't be able to help at all. After saying that, Andre lightly touched the runestone in his palm. The two shield bearers immediately took the lead and walked into the pitch-black tunnel. As they had no thoughts, they did not know what fear was. Coupled with their bodies made of steel, they instantly gave people an inexplicable sense of security. At least, Maris was much more relaxed than before. Seeing that everyone was ready, Andre didn't hesitate and followed the shield guardian into the darkness filled with twisted magical energy. Nina, who never liked to talk nonsense, followed closely with her animal companion. Eunice was the third, and the timid Maris brought up the rear. Accompanied by the heavy footsteps of shield bearers, the group quickly passed through the pitch-black tunnel. At first, they could still see each other's backs, but as they got farther and farther away from the exit, the fog in the surrounding air became thicker and thicker. In the end, even if two people were very close to each other, they couldn't sense each other's existence. The visibility was even less than 10 centimeters. But this was not the most terrifying thing. The most terrifying thing was that as they walked, they suddenly realized that it wasn't only their vision that was being restricted. Their hearing, touch, smell, and taste were all slowly disappearing. After half an hour, they couldn't even hear their own heartbeats. They couldn't confirm where they were, whether their companions were still around, or whether they were still alive. When a person completely lost their perception of the outside world, they would immediately be surrounded by an indescribable fear. They couldn't see anything. They couldn't hear anything. They couldn't smell anything. They couldn't taste anything. Even their sense of touch, hunger, and pain had all disappeared. Andre felt as if he had fallen into a certain sense of eternity. Time and space had all lost their meaning. Only the thoughts in his mind were infinitely magnified. It was as if he was in a world completely dominated by the mind. Here, anything he could think of could be realized. As everyone knew, mages used their minds to control the magic energy in their bodies. Then, they used this magic energy to resonate with more magic energy in the air, thus casting spells. Therefore, whether a person's intelligence and mind were strong or not directly determined how far they could go on the path of magic. In a sense, this was simply the holy land that mages dreamed of. It could help anyone increase the activity of their brain, improve memory, logical thinking, abstract understanding, and so on. This was the so-called intelligence. In order to be able to feel this more clearly, Andre stopped and opened his arms to embrace his own thoughts. Of course, in fact, because he had lost his 5 senses, he couldn't be sure whether his body had made such an action. It was just a subconscious feeling. Just as he was spreading his thoughts out, he suddenly realized that there was a pair of scarlet eyes staring at him from the darkness. It was so bright, so eerie, like the crimson moon that occasionally appeared in the night sky, full of gloominess, terror, and ominous. However, Andre didn't choose to run away like a normal person. Instead, he tried to use his mind to probe. "Who are you?" The owner of the scarlet eyes remained silent and didn't have any intention to respond. "Are you a wizard, Maltega?" Andre obviously didn't give up and asked again. The owner of the scarlet eyes still didn't make a sound. However, Andre clearly noticed that the moment it heard the name Maltega, its eyes flickered, but it quickly returned to normal. Without a doubt, just from this point alone, he could determine that she, or it was not a puppet without the ability to think. Just when Andre wanted to try to communicate more, the pair of scarlet eyes suddenly disappeared inexplicably, just like when it appeared. Chapter 871. In the next second, Andre suddenly saw a light in front of his eyes. His senses of taste, hearing, smell, touch, the 5 senses that he had lost slowly recovered. Not long after, he was surprised to see an altar that looked exactly the same as the exit not far away. 2 tall shield bearers were standing motionless on both sides. Without orders, they could stand there until their steel bodies rotted. In addition, Nina, Maris, Eunice, and Winterwolf were also standing at the exit, looking into the tunnel. From their nervous expressions, it could be seen that they must have been here for a while. Of course, they had reason to be nervous. When they first entered the tunnel, Andre was at the front. Now, everyone was here, but he was nowhere to be seen. Coupled with the strange loss of senses in the tunnel, normal people would have bad thoughts. Interesting. First, you use the fog to block perception so that no one can detect the real situation inside. Then, you deliberately create panic and force the brain to forget what you just experienced. Master of those scarlet eyes, what secret are you trying to hide? Andre narrowed his eyes and muttered to himself as he quickly walked out of the fog and appeared in front of everyone. He was now almost 100% sure that this was not an undersea tunnel at all, but a special space built by an unknown force. In this space, the physical body was completely abandoned, and the mind and consciousness were infinitely magnified. He was not even sure if he walked out on his own or was teleported out by magic. Seeing Andre appear in sight, Maris was instantly relieved. She hurriedly asked loudly, "Damn it, what happened in there? You were in front of us. Why are you behind us now?" "Don't ask me. I'm not too sure. You should know that without the five senses, there is no way to perceive anything outside." Andre pretended to be relaxed and spread out his hands. Obviously, he did not intend to tell anyone what had just happened, and he did not want the secret here to be exposed. Maris nodded with lingering fear. "Well, I admit that you were right. This tunnel is indeed a bit strange, and I swear I will never walk through a second time." "Haha, don't worry. You won't have a chance to walk through it a second time. Now let's go up and see how many good things are buried in the most mysterious room of the Underground Guild." With that, Andre controlled one of the shield bearers and activated the mechanism on the wall. Instantly, a rumbling sound came from under their feet. After a while, the thick wall began to slowly rise. A staircase leading to the top was revealed. Before the entrance was fully opened, Eunice, holding a long sword, could not wait to enter. After a few seconds, she was extremely surprised and shouted, "Oh my God, look at these mountains of gold coins, jewelry, and artworks of art. I think we found a vault. Everyone is going to be rich." "What? Vault? Damn it, you can't take it all." Maris, and ran Maris of the guild. Although she had never been cold or hungry due to her scheming and beauty, she had never been rich. Thus, she had the same fanaticism for wealth as ordinary people. In contrast, the elven druid Nina was much colder. She did not even bat an eyelid. Her animal companion was the same. Druids did not care much about money. Some supreme cults even believed that money was the greatest sin that caused humans to destroy nature and should be eliminated from the root. Thus, they rarely used money and preferred to use the primitive barter method. As for the winter wolf, even if it could speak the surface language fluently, it was still a beast. No amount of gold could compare to a fresh and delicious lamb. Andre admired Nina's peaceful face with great interest. After a full minute, he asked in a half-joking tone, "What? Don't you want to take this opportunity to expand your dry purse? After all, even druids need money to live in the city." "There is no need for that. I'm a child of nature. I can get everything I need from nature. Besides, metals will hinder the connection between druids and nature. If possible, I would rather not see them for the rest of my life." Nina clearly expressed her disgust for gold. Gold and jewels, which were crazy in the eyes of countless people, were worthless in her eyes. Born in nature, die in nature. What a boring attitude. Andre sighed softly. He controlled the two shield bearers to step onto the stairs leading to the upper level. As a transmigrator from the era of information explosion, he was actually a little envious of Nina's simple and close-to-nature attitude. She did not have to be like him, whose mind was filled with schemes and an insatiable thirst for knowledge. Unfortunately, Andre's overly smart brain had decided that he could not calm down to appreciate the greatness of nature and life. It was even more impossible for him to return to the primitive state and rarely use metal tools like the druids. Learning and exploration were his life path, until he found the supreme truth hidden in the endless plains and the universe. The stairs leading to the vault were not long, only less than 15 meters. Andre reached the end in half a minute. The moment he stepped onto the last step, he was immediately blinded by the dazzling golden and silver light. Inside the room of more than 200 square meters, there were countless precious metal coins piled up. Among them, there was the alliance currency that was most commonly circulated in the southern region. There were also square gold and silver alloy coins used in the distant desert. Even a magic platinum coins used by the Kingdom of Gorals for bulk trading were filled to the brim with a small chest. These coins were of different shapes, weights, and colors, but the quantity was absolutely astounding. No wonder the residents living in this city often said that more than 70% of the wealth plundered by the pirates over hundreds of years flowed into the pockets of the underground guilds. Now it seemed that it was true. In addition to the coins, there were also many exquisite weapons and armors on the shelves. A large number of paintings, sculptures, and works of art by famous artists were carefully placed on high places. There was even a whole sack of ambergris, which was as valuable as diamonds. There were no professional whaling ships in Orire, so they basically relied on whales that died naturally and were washed to the beach by the sea or were coincidentally picked up by fishermen. Therefore, the production was pitifully low. Even a fist-sized whale could be sold for tens of thousands of gold coins. Countless kings and nobles were willing to go bankrupt in order to get it. Chapter 872. Ha 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 ha. So many gold coins, silver coins, and gems. We're rich. We're really rich this time. Maris lay on the ground with her arms and legs spread out. She screamed crazily as she grabbed a handful of gold coins and threw them into the air. It was unknown if she was too excited or if she had suffered too much mental stimulation, but her face was abnormally flushed. Her eyes were bloodshot and she looked very ferocious. Eunice, who was the first to enter, found a leather bag from somewhere and began to stuff it with all her might. However, she clearly did not know how dense gold was. She stuffed the entire bag to the brim. As a result, due to the excess weight, the bag burst the moment she lifted it up. She was so angry that she stomped her feet. Ignoring the two women who were mesmerized by the huge amount of wealth in front of them, Andre bent down and picked up a gold coin with the image of a dragon printed on it. He smiled and sighed. Isn't this a crazy amount of wealth? I guess those leaders who died with their eyes wide open would never have dreamed that the wealth they had accumulated over hundreds of years would all end up in our hands. That's right, the great goddess of wealth above. Gold, silver, gems. They're the most beautiful things in the world. If I could, I would be willing to sleep with them for the rest of my life. Maris crossed her arms in front of her chest and said with a pious face. It seemed that she intended to become a believer of the other party. Hee, you're not the first person to be mesmerized by gold, and you won't be the last. Andre casually threw the gold coin in his hand to the ground and said meaningfully. Maris could obviously hear the hidden meaning in his words. She immediately sat up and asked, "What do you mean? Are you mocking me?" Mocking? No, don't misunderstand. I'm just explaining a principle. Andre shook his head gently and asked, "Tell me, in your heart, what do gold, silver, and gems represent?" Huh, do you still need to ask? They represent delicious food, good wine, luxurious enjoyment. You can even bribe enough subordinates to do it. Make a career for yourself. Maurice's tone was like that of someone who worshipped money from head to toe. She hated that she could not value money more than her own life. Her attitude undoubtedly made Andre feel a little sad. He hesitated for a few seconds, then sighed and explained, "It seems that you don't understand the meaning of precious metals and jewelry. In fact, they could neither be eaten nor drunk, nor could they win people's hearts. In terms of pure practicality, they could not even compare to steel and wood, let alone the food and water needed for survival. Why do these things make people crazy? The reason was simple. They were a widely recognized medium of equivalent value, which was the currency that merchants often mentioned. What is currency? Currency was a contract between the owner and the market regarding the right to exchange. Fundamentally, it was an agreement between the owners. Let me give you a simple example. I'm a farmer who just had a bumper harvest, and I want to exchange the grain in my hands for other daily necessities. You're a fisherman, and you want to exchange the fresh fish that you've painstakingly caught for food that is easy to store. From the perspective of barter, there should be a transaction between us. But the problem is that I don't want the fish, so you have to first exchange the fish in your hands for something that I need. It just so happens that Eunice has the linen that I want, and she also accepts the linen in exchange for the fish. In this way, you first exchange the fish for the linen, and then use the linen to exchange for food. In this process, you and I both recognize the value of the linen, so it can be called currency. According to historical records, the earliest currencies used by humans were cloth, clay pots, bronze, and shells. Later on, with the improvement of metal smelting technology, they began to mint copper, silver, and gold coins. The initial currency was slightly better. At least it had a value that could be used. For example, cloth could be used to make clothes, bronze could be used to make weapons, and clay pots could be used to store water. But later on, gold and silver coins, other than being used for decoration, had no value at all. It was the recognition in people's hearts that gave them a value that originally did not exist. Think about it. One day, when a famine occurred in a certain area, no matter how much gold, silver, and jewelry you had, there was no way to buy even a grain of food. At that time, would gold and silver coins still have any meaning? Perhaps nobles and rich merchants would be willing to use all their wealth in exchange for a piece of black bread that they would not even take a look at on a normal day. Perhaps at that time, food would replace gold and silver as the new currency. Remember, currency is a contract that is recognized by the market. It is not unchanging. Gold, silver, and jewelry are the most representative of the knowledge, and they are not irreplaceable. Therefore, desperately collecting wealth and then secretly hiding it is the most stupid thing to do in this world. A truly smart person will exchange gold and silver for land, food, workshops, titles, fleets, and loyal subordinates. Through continuous expansion of industries and forces, they will achieve the goal of obtaining power, and then through this power, they will earn more wealth. This cycle will allow money to quickly circulate, thus bringing more and more wealth and power. Now, do you understand the true meaning of wealth? Everything in this room, in fact, except for the ignorance of the owner, is a problem even if you want to spend it. Without enough channels, it is no different from the stones by the shore. Andre's words not only explained the birth and nature of money in simple terms, but also pointed out the benefits of the circulation of wealth, which directly shocked the natives present. Eunice even stopped stuffing gold coins into her body. Her eyes were wide open, as if she was thinking about what she had done all these years. Maris stood up from the pile of gold coins, her whole body trembling involuntarily. This was because she already had a plan in her mind, a plan that could allow her to have power, status, and wealth in the near future. As for Nina and her animal companion, they did not care about these at all. Instead, they had a great interest in sculptures and oil paintings. Looking at the two women who were enlightened, Andre stretched out a finger, tapped his temple, and said, "Please remember, knowledge is the root of all wealth. As long as you have enough knowledge, even if you are penniless, you can create amazing value in a very short time. But if you don't have knowledge, even if you happen to get a large sum of money, you will spend it all sooner or later. All right, my advice ends here. Now, go and choose what you like. As long as you can carry it, it doesn't matter how much you take. As for the rest, don't even think about it. I need a lot of money to build the Sardinia Islands." Chapter 873. Knowledge was power, knowledge was wealth, and knowledge could change one's fate. This was not something that could be casually said in Orire. It was a fact that happened all the time. For example, If a child from a peasant family could learn how to read and write in the common language, as well as simple arithmetic, then he would immediately be hired by a merchant or a noble. He would then jump from the bottom of society to an elite class, such as a clerk or accountant. Another example would be a wandering mercenary who had comprehended the essence of command in countless wars. Not long after, he would be invited by a noble or a king to be responsible for training or commanding an army. There were many similar examples. Due to the relatively slow spread of knowledge, most of the places on the continent were in a state of serious shortage of talents. As long as one had a skill, they would not have to worry about being buried. As for those knowledgeable scholars and mages, even the kings and dukes had to show respect. Otherwise, they would be viewed with hostility by the entire intellectual class. In the end, they would not even be able to recruit people to manage the country. As a girl who was born in a poor family and had been at the bottom of society for many years, she desperately wanted to change her class. No one knew better than Maris what Andre's argument about wealth and currency meant. In this world where no one had systematically studied the economic structure, it was equivalent to a bright light hanging in the darkness, guiding people who were still fumbling about how to earn wealth faster and faster. If Maris was still a little ignorant before, then now she could clearly see the road to the future under her feet. As long as she walked down it steadily, it would not take long for her dream to come true. Without a doubt, for her, this was a huge improvement from her thinking to her ideas. It was a precious spiritual wealth that could not be bought with money. Therefore, when Andre proposed to take all the treasures in the vault, she did not show any dissatisfaction. Instead, she was full of smiles and took 2 small bags of gems that were worth 20 to 30,000 gold coins. Her eyes revealed undisguised admiration. Andre believed that as long as he hooked his little finger, he would immediately receive the most enthusiastic response from her, no matter what he wanted to do. Unfortunately, his mind was filled with thoughts of the owner of those scarlet eyes. How could he have the time to pay attention to these boring games between men and women? One must know that Andre wasn't the kind of stud horse that couldn't move when he saw a beautiful woman. In his mind, there was always a clear order of how to deal with problems. Satisfying his desire for the opposite sex was undoubtedly ranked below his desire for knowledge. After all, to a wizard who was also a transmigrator, the ruins left behind by the Creator's race were far more tempting than a curvy woman. Just as Maurice's eyes gradually revealed her resentment, Nina, who had been looking around for the mechanism to open the vault door, suddenly pointed to a wall and shouted, "I found it! The mechanism was behind this wall. I don't know how to open it." "Move aside, let me try." Andre, who had been waiting for a long time, quickly stepped forward and gently pushed the elven druid away. He reached out his right hand and pressed down a few times. He then shook his head helplessly and complained in a low voice, "Damn it, it's another hidden door. If I want to open it using normal methods, I'm afraid it'll take a lot of effort." Eunice, who had found a heavy war hammer from somewhere, came over and asked excitedly, "Do you need me to smash it open?" Andre hurriedly waved his hand. "No, not at the moment. Violence can easily destroy the internal structure. It'll be troublesome if I'm accidentally trapped. I just remembered a level 2 spell today, knocking spell. I think it should be able to crack the mechanism hidden inside." Knocking spell? Eunice had obviously heard of this spell before and raised her eyebrows in surprise. That's right. It's knocking spell. It can open most doors, chests, shackles, and locks that aren't protected by magic. It's a very practical spell, especially when you don't want to alarm others or make too much noise. As he spoke, Andre took 2 steps back and closed his eyes to concentrate. After a few seconds, a jerky incantation reverberated in the treasury. A ball of white light flew out from his palm and quickly sank into the wall. The originally normal wall soon let out a crisp sound, and then the entire wall began to slowly tilt. Finally, it fell to the ground with a bang, revealing a staircase that led to the top. At the end of the staircase were 2 steel gates. Wow, that's really a lot. I estimate that just building these mechanisms and passageways would cost at least 100,000 gold coins. The leaders of the guilds are really sparing no expense for their own safety. Maris whistled and said sarcastically. Andre nodded slightly. That's right. No matter how sturdy a fortress is, it won't take long for it to fall once there's a problem inside. That's why I say that people like them who only know how to crazily amass wealth, but don't know how to expand and treat their subordinates, well, are simply idiots to the extreme. Even if they took out 1/10 of the wealth in the treasury to reward their loyal subordinates, they wouldn't be deserted by their own people, especially those small guilds that have been oppressed for a long time in the lower city. I'm afraid that they've already reached the limit of their patience. Otherwise, they wouldn't have chosen to switch factions without hesitation when they discovered that the situation wasn't good. Remember, only by learning how to distribute benefits reasonably can one become a qualified leader. Benefits can be shared, but not shared. Schemes can be few, but not many. This means that benefits are often something that everyone desires. If someone monopolizes the benefits and doesn't share them with others, then they will definitely attract resentment and become the target of public criticism. That's why when faced with benefits, one must weigh the pros and cons and know when to give up. But when it comes to planning, it's the exact opposite. One must have one's own opinions. Not only will listening to the opinions of too many people not be of any help, it might even sway one's will and destroy one's confidence. I'll give you these words today, and I hope that you'll remember them well. After all, it's not that easy to be the mayor of Valen City. If there's a major mistake, then I'll abandon you without hesitation. With that, Andre gave the other party a look that said, "Take care of yourself." Afterwards, he ordered the 2 shield bearers to turn the capstan. Not long after, 2 iron gates 2 inches thick started to slowly rise. Large amounts of air with a thick smell of blood quickly rushed in, as if telling of the fierce battle that had happened not long ago. Chapter 874. I can smell the scent of struggle and death, as well as the fragrance of the withering of life. It seems that there are no more living enemies here. Eunice took a deep breath and sighed with emotion in an aria tone. Andre glanced at the empty basement and teased with a smile. Hee, I really couldn't tell that you're a poet with a dark style. I didn't know you had this talent before. Could it be that killing and death can bring you more inspiration? Poet? Eunice curled her lips in disdain. No, I'm just a little touched. Don't compare me with those trash. Ha ha, how dare you compare poets to trash? Well, actually, I don't really like their poems and over-the-top stories. But as an enemy, these guys still need to be vigilant. Although their direct combat ability is not very good, no one could do better than them when it comes to confusing the opponent and stealing information. Andre had heard about the conduct of the bards in Orire. Out of 10 of them, 9.5 were playboys who often sneaked in and out of the rooms of resentful women. Just like a folk proverb described how many nobles and rich businessmen were unknowingly cuckolded, and how many ignorant girls were cheated of their virginity. All of these were the great achievements of the bards. Some daring guys even dared to pack up and elope with their belongings after having sex. When they were tired of playing with them, they would abandon them mercilessly and look for the next hunting target that could excite them. To some extent, bards and scumbags could be equated, but their misdeeds could not hide the fact that they were the best spies in the world. Andre, who had read about the profession, skills, and training of bards, always kept a high level of vigilance against these guys. He did not dare to underestimate their destructive power at all. Just as the two were talking, a few soldiers holding torches suddenly appeared in the basement. They seemed a little nervous and probably came down to check the situation after hearing the sound. One of them clearly recognized Eunice, who had obvious demonic characteristics. He hurried forward and bowed deeply with one hand on his chest. "Greetings, madam. George, Count Mantell asked us to wait here and inform you that the Allied forces have fulfilled their duty as allies. Everyone in this building has been killed. Not a single one of them has escaped." Seeing that Andre had no intention of continuing the conversation, Eunice nodded pretentiously. "I understand. Please tell the Count that we thank him for his help. The underground guilds that have ruled Valen City for hundreds of years are now history. There's only one enemy left for us to deal with, and that is the pirate King Francis and his fleet. That's right. That's what the Count told me. He hopes that you and Mr. Andre can find some time to discuss the matter of ambushing the pirate fleet as soon as possible. The soldier obviously didn't recognize that the person standing next to him was the person he was looking for, so he nervously extended the invitation. He couldn't help but be nervous. After all, half-demons didn't have a good reputation, so he always maintained the necessary vigilance. Don't worry, I'll bring the news to my master. There's nothing for you to do here. Please leave. Eunice obviously didn't want to waste words with an ordinary soldier and directly waved her hand impatiently. The latter didn't say anything else and bowed again. He turned and fled out of the dark basement, unwilling to stay for even a second longer. After watching these fellows disappear at the end of the tunnel, Eunice turned her head and asked Andre, "You've heard what we said just now. Are we going to move the treasures in the vault first or attend the military meeting first?" A light flashed through Andre's eyes as he shook his head lightly. "No, neither. I have something more important to take care of apart from them. Go back to the castle and organize some men to repair the collapsed city gate. I don't want the returning pirates to see any flaws. As for the vault, don't be in a hurry to move it. I'll have the shield bearers seal the entrance from the inside. We'll talk about it after everything is over." Something more important? Is there anything more important than facing the pirate fleet? Mary, who'd been hiding in the back without saying a word, couldn't help but ask with furrowed brows. After all, her vision was limited. Perhaps in her eyes, the pirate fleet was the most powerful enemy in the entire occupation plan. She had no idea that there were still a few projections hidden in the sewers, preparing to summon the great devil. Of course there is, but I won't tell you. There are some truths that you don't have a right to know. Go back and prepare now. The decisive battle is in a day or two. Do your best to restore order in the city. At the very least, let the residents near the docks come out of their homes. Otherwise, no matter how idiotic Francis is, he'll realize that something is wrong. With that, Andre ignored Mary's doubtful expression and directly ordered the shield bearers to pull the capstan again, completely sealing the steel gate. He then immediately contacted the wizard tower and disappeared in the blink of an eye. The next second, he appeared in the dirty sewers of Valence City, less than 100 meters away from the summoning ritual in progress. Before he could steady himself, the half-elf great wizard Orlando appeared and asked with an unusually serious tone, "What are you doing here again? You should know that the ritual is about to enter its final stage. I still have a lot of work that needs to be done quietly. I don't have time to play with you. My apologies for disturbing your work, but I have enough reason. To be exact, it's a major discovery." Andre wasn't intimidated by the other's aura. He calmly bowed and explained his purpose for coming. It couldn't be helped. The legends of the creator's race were simply too fragmented. Only the elves who'd come to Orire from another world had some records, and this part of the records had been copied by the ancient magic civilization. Only those old fellows who'd lived for thousands of years truly knew what had happened in the Age of Thunder. Oh, Orlando subconsciously narrowed his eyes, as if trying to determine the intentions of the young man in front of him. After a full minute, he rubbed his chin and said, "Tell me, what major discovery is it that you've come to visit me instead of dealing with the pirate fleet that's about to return?" Andre smiled faintly and leaned forward. He asked in an extremely low voice, "Before I answer this question, can you first answer a question of mine? How much do you know about the creator's race, the wizards, and the Sardinians? If you don't know much, I'm afraid I'll have to trouble you to contact your mentor." Chapter 875. Creator Race? What does your discovery have to do with the creator race? The half-elf archmage's expression suddenly changed. His originally gentle expression was instantly thrown to the back of his mind, replaced by an indescribably terrifying aura that made people unable to breathe. There was no doubt that this was his true appearance. A master who had half a foot in the legendary realm. A master who had mastered level 0 to level 9 arcane spells, the protagonist of countless bard stories, Orlando Watts. However, Andre was not frightened. He only felt that the magical energy in the air was gradually becoming a little out of his control. It was a little similar to the first time he met the legendary realm Lich, when the latter had completely cut off his connection with magical energy. Obviously, this was an ability unique to legendary realm spellcasters. The half-elf could not completely control it for the time being, but it was enough to interfere with the casting of spells. Andre could not do anything about this overwhelming power for the time being. He could only pretend that he did not care and nodded lightly. Yes, you can say that. I accidentally found a tunnel hidden under the sea. According to the depictions on the statues and murals, it has a history of at least 10,000 years. 10,000 years? That should be right. Orlando walked back and forth on the ground thoughtfully. His eyes glowed as if he was thinking about something. After about a minute, he stopped and raised his head to ask in a deep voice, "How much do you know about the creator race?" Andre spread out his hands helplessly. "Not much. To be exact, very little. I only have a rough understanding of a small part of it from books. I hope you can explain it to me in detail." This answer was obviously within the half-elf archmage's expectations. He hesitated for a moment and quickly explained, "As the name suggests, the creator race is a race that creates life and miracles. Before the ancient elves crossed the portal and settled on this continent, there were already several native races that had established a glorious civilization. Because it was too long ago, we can't accurately determine the period of their existence. We can only roughly infer from the remnants that there were once 5 races that dominated the world 65 to a million years ago. These guys were the creators of toad monsters, shapeshifters, Copra monsters, Kotau, fishmen, Loka fishmen, Sepher frogmen, octopus monsters, and many other amphibious intelligent creatures. The fairies were a race that was born with powerful magic abilities. They created all the fairies, including the goat fairy, the little fairy, the pike fairy, and the little fairy. The Aeoliavians were a half-human, half-bird species. They had created the harpies, tengu, and many other intelligent avian creatures. The Saluk shaman was a half-snake, half-human race with powerful magical talents. They usually had 2 branches. One of them had the head and body of a snake, while the other had the upper body of a human. All the lizardmen, nagas, and other scaly-crawling races on the continent had a part of their bloodline. As for the last one, they were known as humans. Among the 5 creator races, only 3 of them had taken turns to rule the world in ancient times. The fairies and humans were undoubtedly not included. The former had no interest in ruling or ire, and created a plane that was completely different from the physical world, Zifiri. Only the fairies and soul shamans had the right to enter after death. The latter was needless to say. At that time, humans didn't even have their own language, so how could they talk about civilization? Of course, some historians once believed that humans shouldn't be included in the creator races, because whether it was the dragons or the giants, they were far more qualified than humans. In addition to the above, there was another theory that wasn't accepted by the mainstream, and that was that the 5th creator race was the supergiants. A long time ago, a ship discovered an island in the middle of the ocean. The island was surrounded by impassable cliffs. The strange thing was that the cliffs were carved with countless giant human creatures. The sailors once reported that the surrounding maze-like caves would lead the intruders to the interior of the island. The interior was full of forests, and it was spring all year round. There were all kinds of huge broken stone buildings everywhere, as well as tools and weapons that were huge even for the cloud giants. According to the speculation of scholars, there should have been a group of giant humanoid creatures that were more than 15 to 20 meters tall living here. They were likely the ancestors of the giants, or the creators of the giants. They were the 5th creator race. However, this theory is seriously lacking in evidence. So far, there are very few people who have really found the island. I have tried to find it, but to no avail. In fact, the magic that we mages use now comes from the research results of the Baz magic fish, the Ailey bird race, and the Saluk shaman. Especially the last Saluk shaman, the civilization that these halflings and snakes built was the closest to our time. They also preserved the most ruins. 90% of the ancient magic civilization's technology came from them. If I remember correctly, you seem to have mentioned a shaman just now, right? Yes, a shaman called Maldija. According to the description of some mysterious words, he seemed to have created a race called the Sardinians. These guys worshipped him like a god, and even built altars and statues. Andre did not try to hide any information and confidently told him everything he knew. After all, this information was related to the next cooperation, and the basis of cooperation was mutual trust. Moreover, deceiving a great mage who was half a step into the realm of legends was a huge risk. Interesting, an unknown creator. Can you tell me what you have discovered? Orlando's mouth curled up slightly, and his face was filled with an excited smile. To a spellcaster of his level, the ancient ruins in the ordinary sense had long lost their research value. However, the creator race was different. They had a lot of knowledge and technology that even legendary mages would covet. Andre organized his words slightly and said with a solemn expression, "A tunnel, a mysterious tunnel that could deprive all sensory organs. I even feel that it exists in another space. When you enter the central position, you will feel that your consciousness and thoughts are infinitely magnified. It feels as if your whole body suddenly becomes smarter. In addition, a pair of scarlet eyes will appear later. I can't confirm whether it is the physical body of a person or a creature or a pure consciousness invasion." Chapter 876. What? Did I hear wrongly? Are you sure it's complete sensory deprivation? This is not a realm that mortals can achieve. Orlando opened his mouth wide in shock. This was the first time he had lost his composure in front of an outsider in nearly 200 years. He was so shocked that he could not care less about maintaining his facade. However, as a sorcerer, Andre understood what the half-elf archmage's expression meant. According to the principles of Arcana and the relationship between energy levels, it would take at least a level, 11 illusion or necromancy spell to completely block the five senses without damaging the nerves. It should be noted that the highest level of ordinary spells was only level 9, and those above level 9 were collectively known as legendary spells. Only legendary mages above level 20 could cast them. Most ordinary people did not understand that legendary spells were also divided into levels. Among them, the lowest was level 10, similar to large-scale volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, blizzards, and so on. Their main characteristics were that they affected a large area, were highly lethal, and could not be precisely controlled. The ones that were slightly higher were level 11 spells, such as the anti-gravity spell that the ancient magic civilization used to uproot a city from the ground. There was also the artificial singularity that used the infinite gravity of a black hole to suck in all enemies within a radius of hundreds of meters, and so on. Their characteristics were that they involved the transformation of energy and matter, or the relationship between the essence of life and the soul. They required the caster to have a deep understanding of the various strange phenomena that existed in the universe. Even among the legendary mages, there were very few who could do this. As for the highest level, 12 spell, there was only one so far, and that was the legendary spell invented by the greatest spellcaster in human history, the ruling body of the ancient magic civilization. The first, and also the last speaker of the Wilda's Council, the leader of hundreds of legendary mages, and the legendary spell known as the demigod Bain-de-Hargot. This spell was so powerful that even the sun god Pero, who controlled the sun, contract, law, order, and many other divine positions at that time, couldn't resist it. In just a second, he was drowned by the terrifying torrent of time, completely degenerating to the time before he was born, and disappeared in the universe forever. No matter how his believers called out to him, there was no way to revive him. Of course, the backlash effect of time reversal was just as powerful. When the enemy disappeared, all the time that had been applied to the target would be replayed on the caster. The demigod Bain-de-Hargot was disintegrated into a sperm and an egg in the blink of an eye. Since his death, this incomparable spell had probably been lost, because there was no other creature in the world that could understand time so thoroughly. Even now, when the gods heard this name, they could not help but tremble. Obviously, the sensory deprivation that he had encountered in the underwater tunnel was definitely beyond the scope of level 10 magic. That was why Orlando said that it was not the domain of mortals, and that there were not many gods who could do that. In order to prevent any mistakes in judgment, Andre specially closed his eyes and recalled the feeling he had before. Then, he replied with certainty, "Yes, I'm 100% sure that it was definitely sensory deprivation. Whether it was vision, pain, taste, smell, or the nervous system all over the body, all of them lost their function during that time." Very good. I think I've already developed a great interest in the place you described. If your intention is to cooperate, then we can talk about the specific matters now, Orlando said seriously while stroking his chin. Since I'm here, I'm naturally looking for a partner. The only question is whether you can guarantee to uncover the secret hidden behind the mysterious phenomenon. Andre did not have any scruples just because the other party's level was twice as high as his. Instead, he directly raised the most critical and sharp question. He really could not be sure whether the half-elf could deal with the thick black fog in the underwater tunnel. If he couldn't, then the previous discussion would be meaningless. Orlando undoubtedly understood this as well. He frowned and hesitated for a few seconds before quickly explaining, "I'm sorry, before I see and feel that power with my own eyes, I can't give you a clear answer. However, I can swear that no matter what precious thing we find in there, it will belong to you 100%. I just need knowledge, that's all. Of course, in return, I also have a small request, and that is, before you confirm that this matter is beyond my ability, you can't tell a second person about it." "You mean, I'll hide it from your mentor first?" Andre was not an idiot. He instantly sensed something unusual from the words, and hurriedly probed carefully. That's right. You're a smart person. You should understand the value of the Creator's ruins. So, the fewer people who participate in the sharing, the more confidential it can be. If we really find something, it can also become our unique trump card, right? Besides, you and I are both very prideful mages. We're not willing to be protected by others for the rest of our lives, even if that person has no ill intentions. The half-elf did not seem to have any intention of hiding his intentions, and openly expressed his thoughts. Although he still maintained a considerable degree of respect for the legendary level Lich, he was no longer willing to be under him. Deep in his heart, he longed to surpass his mentor. As a mage who grew up under traditional elite education, he had a similar idea long ago. After all, the Lich's education was to let his apprentices surpass or even kill him. However, the gap between the two was too big in the past, and this idea was hidden. But now, Orlando was about to enter the ranks of legendary-level mages. He felt that it was time to put this idea into action. Andre noticed the burning gaze in the other party's eyes and nodded thoughtfully. "What you said makes sense. I can agree to it first, but there's one thing I have to say in advance. If this matter is beyond your ability, if this matter is beyond my ability, the alliance will immediately be terminated. I will also take the initiative to help you contact my mentor. I guarantee that it will not harm your interests." Before Andre could finish his words, Orlando automatically completed the second half of the sentence. He knew that the young man in front of him was the holder of the arcane eye in the prophecy. Not only did he receive the attention and protection of the entire Virtus Council, but he would also become a true legendary-level mage one day, just like himself. So, there was no need to play those little tricks and cause trouble for himself for no reason. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.